If you carry a firearm and discharge your weapon in self-defense, you could face hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees and expenses. So carry the protection of CCW Safe, Self-Defense Legal Services membership. Upfront payment of all criminal and civil defense costs with no out-of-pocket for members. Unlimited defense budgets, unmatched legal expertise. Carry the same level of support police officers have. Carry CCW Safe, the highest caliber.
And we are back. I'm Chris Evans, the CEO of Survival Dispatch. Thank you for joining us this evening on this Easter weekend. Tonight, we're going to provide an update on the terrorist threat to us here in the homeland. 4 years of having the southern border wide open has flooded our country with radicals who hate our guts and have bad intentions. So first things first, as you can see, I've got Colonel Jeff Cooper's combat mindset color scheme up here. Other people, whoever prepared this graphic, said for self-defense awareness, but it's essentially the combat mindset is what Colonel Jeff Cooper called it. And as far as I'm concerned, we are in a condition orange. So condition orange means the shit's not hitting the fan, but it's highly likely that it will. And that means we have to maintain a somewhat higher level of situational awareness. So if you're on a phone and you can't read the graphic that's up there, I'll go through it quickly. So condition white, you're sitting at home this evening. You don't have a care in the world. You're watching Survival Dispatch News or something else. That's condition white. You're not worried that there's anything bad is imminently going to happen to you. Condition yellow, you walk out the front door, you go to cross the street, you look both directions. That's condition yellow. Just paying attention to what's going on around you. Condition orange, though, which is where I feel we are right now, this is where when you're in public, you have to have a heightened state of alertness, especially the next couple days. So Easter Sunday and Monday would be prime days for radical Islamic terrorists to hit us. They love to hit people on dates that either stand out to their religion or our religion to send a message. So what that means, I'm not suggesting anybody stay home. We're going to go to Easter service tomorrow like we always do. Now, keep in mind, our church is in the middle of nowhere in Florida, in Pearson, Florida, Pearson Baptist Church. And we have about 50 members, so pretty small church. Not a high likelihood that we'll be attacked, although there's a bunch of us there that definitely carry. But condition orange meaning that over the next couple of days, pay attention. If something doesn't look right, it's not right, and report it. It's better to report something and have it turn into nothing than to think, that looks kind of strange, and just letting it slide. So you want to have a higher level of situational awareness is what I'm getting at this particular point in time, and not just the next couple days. Again, after having the border wide open for 4 years, we are absolutely flooded with terrorists. And not only are we flooded with terrorists, the country is now flooded with weapons that we left behind in Afghanistan, were purchased by groups like Hezbollah and the Sinaloa cartel, and then snuck into our country. We have evidence of that. Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers was the first one to break the story of 9 man pads being smuggled into America. So these are shoulder mounted surface to air missiles, small payload, 1.5 pounds, heat seeking, meant to take out engines in a jet at relatively low altitude shortly after they take off or shortly before they land. And that's just scratching the surface. The old adage, for every rat that you see, there's 100 that you don't, is in play here. And if we go back to the early 1990s, so we had Don Mann on a few years ago. Don was a Navy SEAL for 20 years, CIA for 23 years. And he said in the early 90s, our intelligence showed that we had somewhere around 200 terrorist cells made up of Hezbollah and other groups, okay? And each of those cells had anywhere from 1 to 10 to 15, 20 members in them. We currently know of at least 2,000 cells in America of terrorists. So it's exponentially higher than it was before, and the threats are a much higher magnitude than they were previously. So I'm going to pull up another one here on Colonel Jeff Cooper's color coding, because somebody at some point in time very wisely, and I don't know who it is, so I can't credit them, added a condition black. So we're condition orange right now, means we have a heightened level of awareness. Red essentially means the shit is hitting the fan and it's go time. Like now you have to take some sort of action, because if you don't, you could be, grievously injured or killed. Condition black, though, is when people freeze up. So people are so petrified, literally petrified and scared of what's going on, that they freeze up. And condition black is pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get hurt and potentially killed. So a good example would be, and I know the regulars are probably sick of me mentioning this, but it's a really good perspective for those people who are new to this stuff. 70% of Floridians who are killed by gunshot wound that did not commit suicide are killed with their own firearm. So what that means is they get into an altercation of sorts, they get attacked through no fault of their own, they pull their pistol and they freeze up, and the bad guy takes the pistol away and shoots them. So condition black, really, really bad. So from a conditioning standpoint, we want to be prepared for these things, because as you've heard Mike Sterling mention many times, there's a famous Sun Tzu adage that basically says human beings never rise to the occasion, they fall to their level of training. And that doesn't always mean that you have to, have specific skills with firearms. That's good, it's important, but there are other skills that go with this as well. So let's move on from there, now that everybody kind of has some grasp of what the colors mean. So tonight's SITREP, and again, you can get our SITREP from Patreon or Substack. So patreon.com/survival dispatch, or go to survivaldispatchnews.com. That'll take you to our Substack. All of the paid content's the same. You don't have to belong to both of them, but that's where paying members can get the daily situation report that has all of the notes, all of the links that we show on screen. That way you can study it at your leisure. You don't have to sit around for a couple hours for a podcast. It's a highly curated, accurate daily newspaper, truthful newspaper, put it that way. We cover everything from far left to far right, everything in between. When we see certain things that are red flags, Mockingbird Media, for example, all repeating the same thing, that's an immediate indication that it's a psyop, it's a narrative being pushed, and we should go look and see where the money's actually going to get to the bottom of something like that. So tonight's SITREP has all kinds of links. I'm going to show them. I'm not going to read through all of these websites and bore you to death, but I will touch on each of them as we go through them. So as far as current intelligence with regards to terrorist threats here in the United States in 2025, is there are multifaceted risks at play. And that includes domestic and foreign elements contributing to this high threat environment. So a few of the things I want to touch on: domestic terrorism threats. So for the past 4 years, and we just found out, Tulsi Gabbard released Joe Biden's papers on middle-aged white males being the biggest terrorist threat. And I'm here to tell you that if we were the biggest threat, you would know it. You would have known it long before now. We're not the biggest threat domestically. Now, domestically, the biggest threats, and the ones who are committing violence: Antifa, the people vandalizing Teslas, BLM, and the list goes on. So again, it's not what the Biden admin portrayed it to be. We got super high pollen here right now. It's killing my breathing. Anyway, so domestic terror threats include lone wolves and small groups. And the primary threat in the U.S. would be lone wolves more so than small organized groups. So these are people who feel that they have an ideological bone to pick with us. Could be over the mass deportations, could be over transgender stuff, all of that. But it always seems to come back to being related to motivation because of an ideology: anti-government sentiments, partisan extremism, people who subscribe to jihad against us. So a lot of these people are radicalized online, and it's difficult to detect because they don't have a lot of, call it, formal relationships with groups that we are watching. So This link here, CSIS, this is a global terrorism threat for 2025, and it touches on everything domestic and global. It's a good source of information. Take it with a grain of salt, but it's still valuable information. The next one up that we've got in the today's SITREP is Homeland Security and their forecast and threats for 2025. And this was just published on January 28th, so not too long ago. And they basically touch on all the things that I just mentioned. So speaking of ideological drivers, factors like polarizing, call it socio-political issues, 2024 election cycle, further chaos or chasm between us, misinformation. Just think all of the Russia baloney that's been uncovered as just that, baloney. Conspiracy theories, claims of misogyny over sending abortion back to the States, pro or not pro sentiment towards alphabet people, anti-Semitism, anti-everything, literally. All of this is fueling potential domestic violent extremism, which the government now likes to refer to as DVE, domestic violent extremism. That's their new acronym for this. So essentially, from 2016 to 2024, domestic terrorist attacks and plots against government targets have tripled compared to the previous 25 years. So it's been a pretty volatile situation. And again, pardon me, the pollen is off the chain here right now. My poor wife, she's got allergies. Her face is swollen up. I've got a chest full of it right now. I'm not sick, but boy, there's a lot of pollen here right now. All right, so getting back on track. Basically, all of this started when Donald Trump came down the escalator. And powerful forces have whipped people into a frenzy ever since then. And it has driven us further apart. We see nonstop calls for violence. And it comes from groups like Antifa, BLM, the ones I already mentioned, pro-Hamas people, the hands-off people. I'm not sure if that's even going to stop, because I read so much. I read 300,000+ words per day. And every single day, it seems to me that the extreme talk of kill Elon Musk, kill Donald Trump, kill these public officials, that the threats just keep getting more and more frequent and bolder and more bolder as they go. And I'm not really hopeful. I don't have a lot of faith in Pam Bondi, and you all know why. So I won't take us down that rabbit hole again. But I will share the next page. There's another article on CSIS. Again, all of this is in tonight's SITREP. So patreon.com/survival dispatch or survivaldispatchnews.com. $9.99 a month or $95 a year. You get 2.5 months for free. And you get access to all of our situation reports each day. You get an invite to our Signal chat, which is just crazy volume of intel and information and camaraderie. And you also get an invite to Saturday morning aftermath sessions with me and other people to cover things like last week we covered putting together your home defense plan. This morning we covered alternate communication strategies and things that you can do. So moving back to the ideological drivers, I don't know that there's much more to share on that, but I will say that this article here, the rising threat of anti-government domestic terrorism, what the data tells us, has a lot of stuff in it from the Biden admin. And the only reason I'm sharing it is because if you go and read this, you really do need to take it with a grain of salt. But you can essentially tie it back to highly publicized people of note, if you want to call them that, who've been either hinting at violence or outright calling for violence. So in addition to that, let me see where we are in the SITREP here. FBI and DHS assessments, pardon me. So the FBI has said there's been this significant rise in terrorism investigations with a 357% increase from 2013 to 2021. The thing is, much of that was a charade investigating non-existent white supremacy threats. So our good friend Keith Graves will tell you that after he retired being an active duty cop, was traveling around the country, training different agencies, including the feds. Somebody from the feds, would come and speak and say, middle-aged white males, number one domestic threat, and everybody would start laughing. It's a made-up narrative that started with Brennan and Obama to essentially vilify Caucasian middle-aged men. And there's been no evidence to support that. So when there's a 357% increase from 2013 to 2021, keep in mind, a lot of that is just complete baloney. Now, what isn't baloney is the threat of people who've been radicalized online, like I said, by Antifa, BLM, people who are getting paid by the Soros Foundation to do these things. And they tend to target what I would call soft targets. So soft targets would be a lot of churches, not all of them. Some have pretty significant protection, but soft targets would include churches, a lot of schools, not all schools, and a lot of government facilities. And that's really where the focus has been for law enforcement as far as credible threats, investigating credible threats. And again, not playing into, all of the baloney that the Biden had been spun, which it was just a bunch of fantasy stuff. So let's move on. Let's talk foreign terrorism threats, because there's some pretty significant threats here. So we have these FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, ISIS, which of course is a spinoff from Al-Qaeda. They still are expressing an intent to either conduct themselves or inspire attacks in the U.S. As a direct result of, Obama, Biden, Mayorkas flooding our country with invaders, literally flooding us with these terrorists. Depending on whose numbers you want to believe, there's probably somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 terrorists that have been let into this country. And if you do the math, J.J. Carroll did the math, and I'm trying to remember exactly how it went, but he said if there were 50 million people here illegally, which is the high end, somewhere called between 30 and 50 million, and you had 1% of those people were terrorists, it's a huge number. Thank you, Emmy Waters. Appreciate your support always. So even if it's 0.1%, it's still a super significant number. Now, without going down a rabbit hole as far as the World Trade Center's 9/11 was concerned, you get about 24 people were active that day and caused tremendous damage to us. Imagine that being tens of thousands of bad guys, not even hundreds of thousands, just tens of thousands. So a good example of this radicalization by these groups would be the New Orleans attack on January 1st this year. That was inspired by ISIS. It underscores the fact that the bad guys will use whatever weapons that they can. It doesn't have to be a gun, doesn't have to be a knife, could be a vehicle, could be drones, could be drugs, could be all kinds of things. So again, man, this pollen is absolutely killing me tonight. So there's another article in tonight's SITREP here on the rising threat of domestic terrorism. This is fairly recent, 2 years old. It's a little bit newer than the last one that went to 2021, but again, it's still polluted by a lot of Obama rhetoric. So the only reason I bring this up and the reason I put it in the SITREP is because it's a really good example of false information being spread. And let's call it the other team feel that if they repeat a lie enough times that it becomes truth. The problem is it doesn't become truth, but perception is reality, and people perceive it to be truth as a result of that. So let's go back though to FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations. So there's a lot of influence, of course, from the Middle East. You've got the Israel-Hamas conflict, which I personally, I don't care about either side. I'm not interested in seeing innocent people killed or anything like that, but I think we should stay the heck out of this stuff. I don't want to be part of it at all. They've been shooting each other and killing each other since Christ was a cowboy. and I'm more focused on the job at hand here. You know, there's an old adage, if you can't look after yourself, you can't look after anybody else. And we have not been doing a good job of looking after America. And that is now in the process of changing, of course, thanks to the Trump administration. So Middle East, you've got all these geopolitical events going on. They only serve to galvanize extremist sentiments, and that inspires attacks on the U.S., right? So you've got Iran helping the Houthis, and we get involved and we bomb the Houthis. What that does for all the radicals in the Middle East, it just cements their perception that we're the great evil. We're the great Satan, you know, as the mullahs like to say. And even if it's unlikely that the Houthis would be able to attack us here, they inspire these other groups. They pass intel off to other groups. You know, the enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine. So all of these terrorist organizations are in cahoots together these days. They share a lot of information. They share tactics. They share intelligence, and they share hate for us in a big way. So let me just move on to the next one here. And again, I'm not going to read all these articles and bore you to death, but this is a pretty good article here from the Homeland Security. And basically, the gist of this article is that what happened in New Orleans, we really can't stop it from happening in other locations. You can put bollards up and stuff like that, but we're not going to have that everywhere. Kevin, appreciate the tip there. Thank you very much. If I could get this pollen out of my chest, I'd be doing a little bit better. Anyway, the point being is that particular attack on January 1st is probably what we'll see the highest level of prevalency, right? So just to put a fine point on it, you've got an individual, they've been radicalized online. They will find a way to use a pickup truck or a vehicle of some sort to drive into people and create chaos and kill people in the process. He had some improvised explosive devices as well. Nothing along the lines of Timothy McVeigh and Oklahoma, but still, if they had gone off, it would have increased the damages. So I want to kind of categorize this, and everything up until now, I've just been trying to paint a picture here. So let me pull up the next one here. I've got all kinds of information in tonight's SITREP that I'm just not going to cover because, again, I don't want to bore you to death with listening to me. So this is border apprehensions. This is when Trump put Title 42 in place, the Remain in Mexico policy. This is under Trump's first tenure. Biden swore in. Mayorkas, at the direction of John Brennan and Obama, opened the floodgates, and all of a sudden, you know, we have a massive number of illegals with ill intentions in our country. So these numbers here are from the DHS, so they're not believable because they're the DHS under the Biden admin, but let's roll with them just for the heck of it. So they're claiming 3.8 million. I think the number is more like 20 million came in during those 4 years. So you've got 3.3 million crossed. And you've got legal and illegal 2023, 1.8 million. Then you've got another 1.23 million that were given court appearances. They never show up for this stuff, by the way. They estimate 530,000 gotaways, 530,000. That would actually be the number of children smuggled in. As far as gotaways are concerned, it's millions. And it just in 1 month alone, if you look at the bottom here, so this is in 2022 and 2023, 180,000 people in 1 month, according to them. These are huge numbers, unprecedented numbers. So just to tie that back together again, the fallout from that is that the numbers of ill-intentioned people in the country has grown exponentially because of the door being left wide open for 4 years. The abandonment of billions of dollars of military and equipment in Afghanistan has found its way into the cartel's hands, into Hezbollah's hands, and therefore into their operatives here in the homeland. It's fallen into their hands. You're talking about machine guns, all kinds of mortars, man pads, a lot of stuff that typically they wouldn't have access to, especially inside of our border. So the point being is that if you follow people on X, let's say like Sarah Adams, who's very knowledgeable on this stuff, you'll see she shared a lot of information on sleeper cells and their aspirations to undertake these coordinated attacks. ISKP is a new name to me, Islamic State Khorasan Province. Keeps coming up recently though, and they have some relationship with ISIS and Al-Qaeda, so that kind of tells you everything that you need to know there. But essentially what her data shows, and we've reported on this in the past, is that the intentions of these bad people who came into our country revolve around what are called swarm attacks. So we've had intel on this actually for about 20 years. It's not a big secret. Thank you, Katie. Appreciate that. So here's an example. I've given it before, but it's worth repeating. Imagine that you have a small county, a couple 100,000 people or less, 100,000 people. Imagine 12 terror cells of 5 or 6 guys attacking 12 schools simultaneously. So there will not be enough law enforcement to respond to all of those incidents. And that county will have to call for mutual aid from surrounding areas. Realistically, you might take out 1 or 2 of the cells. You're not going to take them all out. So they're going to have big casualties at these schools. Now imagine the next day that the remaining cells go and attack another 10 schools in another small county. And then imagine the next day, what's left of them, 8 or 9 terror cells, goes and attacks 8 or 9 schools in another small county. When this gets war gamed out by everybody, including the JTTF, what essentially happens by day 3, society breaks down. Nobody's sending their kids to school. Nobody's going to work. Because of that, supply chains are cut off. There's no food in the grocery store. You're looking at massive chaos. Now, imagine that happening across the entire country. Al-Qaeda has flat out said for years now, they want to see no less than 50,000 casualties in their next attack on us here in the homeland. So pretty big numbers. And actually, you know, if they attacked an open air venue with things like aerosolized fentanyl vis-a-vis, you know, being brought in by drones, which we covered a few years ago and everybody laughed at us. They're not laughing so hard on that one anymore. You could potentially kill tens of thousands of people in a stadium that's, say, got capacity for 100,000. Anyway, if these swarm attacks were to happen, multiple jurisdictions across the country, several days in a row, imagine the panic that would set in at that point in time. And then let's crank it up another notch. So then throw in a cyber attack where they take our power grid down to about 95% of the population, and they take down all the data networks, voice networks. You will not see that as the first thing in an attack on us. And the reason you won't see that as the first thing is because the bad guys want everybody to know what they've done. So they want that mass chaos and confusion. So if we get to the point where it's been 3 days of coordinated attacks in concert across the country, and we're shut down completely as a society, that's when they'll turn the power off. That's when they turn the internet off. And this morning we covered alternate comms for this specific reason. But the amount of damage that could be done to us in fairly short order is crazy. Our grid is super vulnerable. The Chinese brag about having access to 24 of our infrastructure networks. So that means everything from power grids. We have 3 of them, east, west, and Texas. We have 55,000 substations in those 3 power grids. Out of those 55,000 substations, 9 of them are critical junction points. If you take those 9 out, you knock power out to 95% of the country. So you don't have to knock out 55,000 substations. The other thing is that the transformers for those substations are now running about 48 months lead time. They come from Germany and other places in Southeast Asia. We don't make them. We don't stock them. So to get everything back up and running would be a gargantuan task. Now imagine when they break into the power grid, if they sent something like 700,000 kV down lines that were intended for 200,000 kV, it would melt everything. So now you're talking replacing, countless miles of transmission lines. It would put us back into the 1800s in a blink of an eye, and it would take years for us to crawl out of that. It would also open us up to a potential attack here on the homeland, meaning, military action against us. Without having communications and coordination, it's probably the only way that the enemies could beat us with the number of guns and trained people that we have. But then again, they could just sit back and laugh at us being sent backwards in time and everything imploding. So the wargaming for these perspectives is that somewhere around 90% of Americans would be dead in the first 3 months. So imagine all the people who are diabetic. They've got insulin. They can't get insulin. It's not refrigerated, and how quickly they would die off. Imagine no food supply chain, how fast that would affect people and how quickly they would die. It's not hard to see how something like this could go really south really fast. Mike Sterling likes to mention when Baghdad fell and how all hell broke loose. And I'll just recap that for those of you who aren't familiar with it. So when Baghdad fell, in the first 48 hours, everybody and their dog was looting everything they possibly could from stores, government institutions, other people. But at 48 hours-ish, then the bad guys came out of the woodwork, and the marauders call them. And then they stole all the stuff from the people who'd done all the looting prior to that. We had about 300,000 troops in that area. And even with 300,000 troops, golly, this pollen is killing me tonight. It still took us the better part of a month to restore order. So we're really no different at the end of the day. Look at what people do over a TV on Black Friday. They'll beat the tar out of each other. Now imagine that people haven't eaten. People don't have clean water to drink. People have no communications. They don't know what's going on. It's not hard to see that we would fall into the same level of call it chaos that Baghdad did. It's a good example of human behavior. And I've been saying ever since I inherited the survival dispatch several years ago, I've been saying we're never more than 3 missed meals away from anarchy. 3 meals, people lose their mind. Look at all the fights in fast food places these days. It's a disgusting comment on our society. So that's kind of like from best case to worst case scenario. Best case scenario, you got lone wolves. They pull attacks off like New Orleans that terrorize people. We get past it, but we won't have the ability to stop all those small lone wolf attacks. And then you step it up a notch, to organized bad guys. So you can think TDA, who are very opportunistic. They'll work for anybody. You can think the cartels. You can think of terror groups like Hezbollah, Hamas, those sort of groups. And as you go up that food chain, it gets more and more sophisticated, and the potential damage that they do to us gets worse and worse. And if you pay attention to what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia with drones, you've got $2,500 drones taking out multi-million-dollar sea vessels. And it's not hard for terrorists to get their hands on drones here and outfit them with a payload. And also keeping in mind that the software from Hollywood that was open source and developed to run light shows, it's called Drone Swarm, originally was intended 1 operator, 5,000 drones. That software now, 1 operator, 15,000 drones. So just imagine a fraction of that, 100 drones. 100 drones fly into a football stadium and they drop aerosolized fentanyl on everybody. You're looking at massive numbers of casualties and chaos. But again, in the swarm scenario, imagine them doing that at multiple facilities across the country simultaneously. It's almost hard to imagine how bad things would be. So at the end of the day, just to kind of put a fine point on this, those level of terrorists love to attack on dates that mean something. We've got Easter Sunday and Monday, next 2 days. It would not surprise me at all. I mean, I hope that this is not the case, but it would not surprise me to see attacks tomorrow and the next day. And if those attacks are coordinated by somebody like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or IKRN, you can expect them to happen in multiple cities simultaneously across the day, kind of like those of us who were around for 9/11. And when we heard that a plane had flown into the tower, we're like, man, that's kind of crazy. And then whatever it was, a half hour later, we get word that, holy crap, another plane flew into the second tower. Everybody at that point in time realized we're under attack. This is not a plane that was off course that just happened to fly into the World Trade Center. They're attacking us with this. And that same type of reaction would grip us if we see these other types of attacks. So just a few numbers here for you. Department of Homeland Security and FBI right now have grants in the range of $450 million. And they're passing this money out through nonprofit security grant program, that it's called, and it's on the DHS website. And anybody who's interested can go there and find out more about it and how to participate. I will say Lieutenant Colonel Doc Pete Chambers and his group, especially Michael Hall, are part of this type of scenario where they're former high-level military guys or current military like Michael Hall. And this administration is going to use NGOs against the bad guys, kind of like the last administration used NGOs against the good guys. They use the same tool, but for our interests as opposed to theirs. Not sure how that sits with me, to be quite honest with you. The whole thing is crooked as a dog's hind leg. But anyway, with that being said, there was one more that I wanted to bring up here. Give me just a second. I think this was it here. Yeah, this is it. So this is from the Department of Homeland Security, and this describes the terrorism-related threat to the United States better than the other ones because it's not so focused on this make-believe, white guys, middle-aged white guys. This actually speaks to some of the threats. And again, I'm not going to read through all of these. If you look at the SITREP, let me show you what the SITREP looks like just in this section alone. So if I scroll back up again, for those of you who haven't seen a SITREP before, here's where we started. Here are, everywhere you see in blue are links to documents that I've been touching on. And right now we are down in this area right around here, almost to the conclusion. And you can see now that if I were to read all these articles off, you guys would be sound asleep and checked out, and that would be the end of tonight's episode, right? So we're trying to avoid that from happening. So suffice it to say that I'm just going to put a fine point on this. We're in condition orange as far as survival dispatch is concerned. Some people think we're already in condition red. They could be right. We could be wrong, but I think it's condition orange right now. There's a very high threat level at this point in time, and not just for tomorrow and the next day, for this entire year. And if we're looking at large scale attacks, putting the lone wolves aside, they all share one thing in common. They're all tied back to radical Islamic terrorists. Every single one of the credible threats that we have some intelligence on. Now, they also work with the cartels. So Hezbollah has been embedded with the Sinaloa cartel since the early 1990s. The members of Hezbollah look and speak with the same accent as the Sinaloan cartel members. I mean, it's virtually impossible to tell them apart from each other anymore. An example of their cooperation, China sends the precursors to fentanyl to Mexico. Hezbollah and the Sinaloa cartel have these rudimentary labs. They make the fentanyl and then they get it into America. And some people take fentanyl directly. Other times they put it in drugs, like they step on other drugs to make them more powerful. Depending on whose numbers you want to believe, it's killing somewhere between 100 and 300,000 Americans per year. It is all part of the asymmetric, irregular warfare that China's been waging on us since 1949, when they put their 100-year plan in place to overthrow America. And they knew that they're not going to land on our shores and go toe-to-toe with us with conventional, war measures. So that's why they've been chipping away at us with all these other irregular tactics. Anyway, getting back to the conclusion on this stuff. So I want to pull one more thing up. And pardon me, in case you didn't know, I would love to have a producer to keep me a little bit ahead of the game on all of this stuff. So the next one from Department of Homeland Security, next link that I want to mention, and I'm mentioning these as opposed to reading them for reasons I've already mentioned, but also I want you to be aware that these tools are out there. So the National Terrorism Advisory Systems. So right now, this looks pretty good. You're not going to see anything on this page until we're this close to the shit hitting the fan before you'll see any types of advisories. So you can go to dhs.gov/national-terrorism-advisory-system. And again, go grab the SITREP from patreon.com/survival dispatch or Substack, which is actually at survivaldispatchnews.com. Bookmark some of this stuff. Like this particular page that I'm showing you right here, I have it bookmarked. Every morning I have this routine that I go through where I measure a bunch of stuff called KPIs, key performance indicators, and I record things in my calendar so I have a historical thing to look back on. This is one of the sites that I go to first thing every morning, hoping that I'm not going to see anything. But if something is fixing to happen, it's highly likely that it's going to show up in this particular place. And I just wanted everybody to kind of be aware of these assets that are out there. So I'm going to reiterate that Easter weekend, communists and Islamic terrorists hate Christians, period. So this being a very special weekend has special value to them when they're seeking to do us harm. So faith-based institutions are the most likely targets. And I would encourage you, if you don't follow Keith Graves and Christian Warrior Training, go do it. Nobody is as up to speed as he is on the threat to churches, as well as the free training he provides for churches to have security teams and to stay safe. And which, by the way, I can see. So Robert Larson said Islam can suck it, and YouTube censored him. For those of you who haven't seen before, I'm surrounded by monitors here. I've got 7 going right now, and I'm monitoring 8 different platforms that we're broadcasting to. And I like to have YouTube right in front of me up here because I can see all the shenanigans from them as far as censoring comments on behalf of people. So again, Robert Larson, Islam can suck it, and they flagged it. I had to allow it. So anyways, getting back on target here. So essentially, churches have a very high symbolic value. We've got some big mega churches as well, where you could potentially have extremely high numbers for casualties. So even though my wife and I, we attend a very small country church, and we're going tomorrow, we always go, we're not going to be scared away from going. We're probably not the target. If you go to a larger church, though, hopefully you have church security team. Hopefully you've been paying attention to Keith Graves, and you know you're in a good spot as far as security is concerned. There have been multiple instances in the past couple of years, and Keith's done a great job of covering this, of security teams actually making contact with people of, you know, Islamic appearance, scouting out their churches, scouting out the lay of the land, actually coming into the church, taking pictures, like really, really bold stuff. And if that's happened at your church, I hope that you have a really good church security team. So let's just touch on the key factors that are driving these threats right now. Polarization, election fallout. So you've got the 2024 election cycle with this amplified extremist rhetoric. That's mobilizing one class of people. You got geopolitical tensions, Israel, Hamas, that I've already mentioned in the Middle East, but you also have, you know, the Houthis, Iran as well. You've got online radicalization, social media platforms basically provide a means for rapid recruitment and incitement, especially for lone wolf guys. And here's the thing with lone wolves, they're usually not lone wolves. You know, if you think that, let's say, Matthew Crooks was a lone wolf, put a 1 in the live chat. If you think that's nonsense and that he had other people helping him, put a 2. If you think Ryan Routh was a lone wolf, put a 1 in the chat, whatever platform you're on. Or if you think he got assistance from others, put a 2 in the chat. I don't think any of us are going to buy this line that So hold on a second. Somebody else, lower class citizen, got censored for saying "suck it, Ken Islam." So I'm seeing a lot of response in YouTube. There's less lag on YouTube than there is over here on Rumble. And of course, we're going to Facebook, LinkedIn, a bunch of other places. And not surprised at all that everybody feels that there was assistance provided to Crooks and Routh. So even though it is possible for lone wolves, I think the guy in New Orleans, for all intents and purposes, was kind of a lone wolf. I don't know that he had a whole lot of help that day. He might have had some help preparing, but I don't think he had a whole lot of help that day. That's an example of somebody becoming radicalized and being a sponge to absorb all of this hate and then go act on something. But I think that every time I hear something was a lone wolf these days, until I've actually researched, I don't believe it. I believe the guy in New Orleans was a lone wolf, but I don't believe Routh or Crooks were, and apparently neither do you. Not a single person. By the way, our skies today, good job. He put a 4. So instead of typing 2 for Routh and 2 for Crooks, he put a 4. That was smart. Good job. All right. So getting back on topic here. So what are the things to watch for? What do we need to be watching for? So if it's truly a lone wolf, that's probably the hardest one of them all to detect. They're going to use what I would refer to as simple weapons. So pistols, rifles, vehicles, knives, it's nothing really sophisticated and big that's going to stand out per se. So if we do see lone wolves, they're definitely the hardest ones. A good example of lone wolves in many instances would be these school shooters, especially the rash of transgender school shooters who are married to this ideology and they feel that they were done wrong. So they go to the school and they shoot it up. I definitely buy into the fact that many of those are lone wolves. I guess the only consistent thing there is the FBI will always say, well, they were on our radar, but they didn't do anything about them. We'll see how Cash Patel does and Dan Bongino, hopefully better. The next thing to watch for would be critical infrastructure. So power grids, water systems, transport hubs. These are all vulnerable to both physical as well as cyber attacks. Well, I just touch on water systems briefly, by the way. There's some reports out there saying that our water supplies could be poisoned and it could affect us. You would have to have a very, very, very small water treatment plant for that to happen because of the dilution effect. That's really not a big concern. The power grids are a bigger concern. And fentanyl being delivered in ways like if you put fentanyl in a city water supply, the chances that people would die are slim to none. It would be way too diluted. But you have to have water stores. We preach to people every time you go to the grocery, pick up an extra case of water, bring it home, stack it up in a spare bedroom, make sure you got lots of drinking water. So that brings us to the soft targets again. And I can't emphasize this enough. So schools, churches, public events, celebrating Christ over the next couple of days. Those are the ones that are at a higher risk because they have low security and a very high value by terrorists. So think of even the schools that have, SROs, sheriff resource officers on staff. Didn't help anybody in Uvalde, which is kind of a, maybe not the best example, but suffice it to say that numbers matter. So imagine that you had a terrorist crew, 10, 15, 20 guys attacking a school that has 1 or 2 SROs. They're very quickly going to be overwhelmed. So again, those are like the prime soft spots, for lack of a better term. I want to mention that there's a phone number, and you should make a note of this, 866-347-2423. That is the reporting line for DHS and FBI. So if you see something out of line, that's the number that you call. So if you're not a guardian and you don't have tonight's SITREP, make a note of this. 866-347-2423. So if you see something and it looks wrong, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, call the number. If you're wrong, that's great. But if you're right, you could save a lot of people as a result of that. So I just want to touch quickly again on the intel that we have had. So essentially, the swarm stuff that Sarah Adams has been talking about, that actually came to our law enforcement's attention approximately 20 years ago, and it keeps coming up over and over and over again. So the swarm attacks multiple locations simultaneously. There's a very high probability that we will see that, and if it doesn't happen imminently, like tomorrow or the next day, it's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when it happens. So why am I touching on this again before we wrap up chapter 1? The reason I'm mentioning it again is because if you have knowledge, you've watched our podcast, you've watched Sarah Adams, Sean Ryan, all these different people, you have the advantage of cluing in sooner than other people. And let me correlate that to what it looks like during hurricane season. So when Hurricane Charlie hit us in 2005, it came up the Gulf Coast. It hit just south of Tampa and did a dogleg right, came across the state and beat the heck out of us here on the East Coast. It was a Cat 5. By the time it hit us, it was a Cat 4, did massive amounts of damage, okay? So in typical fashion, the authorities issued evac orders for everybody who was in the path of Charlie. And most Floridians didn't leave. We didn't leave. We don't leave. We hunker down. And when it got really close, some people were like, holy crap, like I'm living a trailer home and I better get out of Dodge. I-95 turned into a parking lot. I-75 up the west side turned into a parking lot. So that's why this type of information we're sharing matters, because when you hear something like this happening, you're going to know, number one, you got to get home or your rendezvous point with your family, and you probably got to get out of Dodge if you can, depending on the nature, the size, and the scale of whatever's happening, whatever the terrorist threat is. Let me go back to my notes here quickly. Okay, I've already covered the stuff on the man pads. So I do want to mention a couple other things here. Let me just pull up the links for y'all. You can bear with me here. Again, in case you haven't heard me mention it before, we sure could, we could use a producer. Would be a godsend. All right. So I don't want to forget China in all of this. So China is a huge threat to us, especially militarily speaking. China is a big threat to us because they back and support many of our enemies, meaning terrorists, Sinaloa, Hezbollah. All of these groups work with the Chinese, but they also have access to all kinds of critical networks here. So they're an important player. You need to have that in the back of your mind that, holy crap, we're seeing these swarm attacks. Most likely, as soon as everybody knows the country's saturated, the Chinese, North Koreans, Iranians, even Russians will shut down our grid. So you've got to be prepared for that stuff in advance. I've already covered this one, but I'm going to mention again, National Terrorism Advisory System. Bookmark this, dhs.gov/ National Terrorism Advisory System with a dash between each words. National Terrorism Advisory System. All right, next one up. Here's probably the best article of them all that you can get from the SITREP or look it up. But the 2025 Annual Threat Assessment, U.S. Intelligence Community, this was just published on March 25th. This is ultra current information. And you can see that there's a lot in here. That this PDF is incredible. So here it is. This is our annual threat assessment, meaning DHS. And if you look over here to the left, you'll see that it's 31 pages long. It's got intelligence on all these things. So the illicit drug actors, the transnational Islamic extremists. So these would be Hezbollah. I want to actually speak to Hezbollah just briefly because we had a video a while ago, and I don't remember what the primary topic was, but we did mention that Hezbollah Unit 910 was a concern, and somebody made a comment that we were idiots to think that one unit of Hezbollah posed any threat to us. So I want to clarify this. Hezbollah in the Middle East is a branch of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and 100% funded by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So government-funded, state-sponsored terrorists, okay? The entire rest of the world Hezbollah is known as Unit 910. It's not one unit. It means the entire world outside of the Middle East. And Unit 910, from the beginning, were tasked with being self-funding. So that was the motivation for them to get in bed with the cartels as far as drugs are concerned, so that they can make a lot of money and support their efforts. And again, the enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine. So I just want to add clarification to that there's really two different camps of Hezbollah: Middle East, rest of the world. Unit 910. Unit 910 has to come up with their own budget and money. Hence, they get into bed with Sinaloa cartel, amongst other terrorist groups, or I should say, drug dealers, cartel smugglers, whatever you want to call them. This report, as I mentioned, this is the cover again, is ultra current. So I would encourage you to go and grab this if you're really interested in this topic and study this, because it covers all the bases, and it's post-Biden admin. This is a truthful report. And if we go back to the table of contents here, you'll notice something missing here. Do you see anywhere where it says white males, middle-aged white males are the biggest threat, the biggest domestic threat? You don't see it on there because it's just not the case. That was all just an attack on a particular demographic from the last administration. All right, so moving on from there, let's get into how you can improve your situational awareness. Again, I apologize with being a little bit all over the map tonight. I don't have a producer, and I don't have anybody else who can speak while I try and get all the stuff organized in the background when I'm producing and hosting myself. But we want to talk now about how you can improve, or I want to talk now how you can improve your situational awareness. So everything that we do, some of you will be familiar with the OODA loop. So the OODA loop means we observe, we orient, we decide, and we act. Okay. And we all go through this thought process when we're doing things. So I want to give you an example. So our friends at WOFT, where our families train, WOFT.com, the most advanced training facility for private citizens, probably in the entire world, definitely the most advanced one that I've been to. So Philip Tapino, the owner, does this amazing training for people who go there with something as simple as a tactical flashlight. And he's got this building where you can pull a vehicle in. The floor is somewhat padded so that if you go down, you don't get hurt. He can turn all the lights off during the day, and it makes it essentially nighttime with maybe just a couple dull lights to simulate being at a gas station or something along those lines. And there's all these hallways around the perimeter where bad guys are coming in and out, and they confront people. And essentially, Philip is training these people how to react to that sort of stuff. And it's amazing how high people's adrenaline gets. It's also amazing how some people, even though they were told how to deal with something, they freeze and they don't react properly. But I watched this girl, she was 18 years old, her brother was 21, and both of her parents were a little older than me. So they're late 50s probably. And the parents failed miserably and the kids did great. The daughter in particular did great on the flashlight training. So she leaves what's simulated like the front door to the convenience store. She's walking towards her vehicle at the pumps, and she gets confronted by somebody. And Philip uses what are called UTM rounds. So these are dummy rounds. They still hurt like hell. So everybody's, got protective gear on, but they have an actual primer in them. So it sounds just like a regular gunshot. And essentially, this girl, multiple times, she comes out of the convenience store. She's got a flashlight in her hand or in her pocket, and she gets confronted by somebody. And immediately she's like this with her flashlight. And what that does is that now the bad guy's got to stop for a second because you interrupted his OODA loop. He was observing you. He was getting oriented. He was getting ready to attack you. And it doesn't matter if it's human beings or other living sentient beings, they thrive on the element of surprise. When you take the element of surprise away from somebody, unless they're whacked out on drugs, the chances of you being attacked go way, way down. So it's interesting to see how something as simple as a tactical flashlight can interrupt somebody's OODA loop and potentially save your life. But that training at WOFT is really, really interesting. That 18-year-old girl, I want to say that she did this drill like 10 times, and only once did she fail. She got into her car and didn't hit the lock button one time, and one of the bad guys opened the passenger door and would have, in that scenario, would have killed her. But other than that, she did it extremely well. Now, the father, on the other hand, I just want to give you guys some examples of this. Everybody was instructed that if you're walking towards your vehicle and there's a bad guy coming around the back and there's a bad guy coming around the front, choose safety, go back to the convenience store. And the father got confronted 3 times by that exact scenario. And all 3 times, he didn't listen to the instruction. He tried to go around one of these people. So Philip's got these knives that they're kind of like a handheld taser of sorts. If you get touched with the blade, you can hear it bzz, go off like that. So essentially, every time you hear it go off, you've been stabbed. And 3 times the father in the simulation was killed because he was hell-bent determined he was going to get into his vehicle. So again, interrupting people's OODA loops is a really easy thing to do with the right tools. So I'm going to keep the SITREP up on the screen here so I can go through this together with you. So you can practice a lot of this stuff. You can observe what's going on around you. So scanning your surroundings constantly. And think of this in terms of being at church tomorrow. If you're at church tomorrow and you have a large congregation, you're one of these giant churches, it starts from the time that you get to the parking lot. Just pay attention to what's going on around you. Put down your weapon of mass distraction, put it in your pocket, pay attention to what's going on. You see somebody, for example, I'm here in Florida, the temperatures are rising pretty high. If I saw somebody at church tomorrow with a trench coat on, I would immediately be making contact with them, because there's no good reason to be wearing a trench coat or a coat period at this particular point in time in Florida. So being clued into these things, observing what's going on. I'll give you a simple example. When we go to restaurants, we find a table where I can have my back against the wall. I can see all the entrances. I can see all of the people. And it's not that I'm sitting there paranoid, but I'll look up and scan around. And if somebody, a little bit out of the norm comes in, I'm going to be alerted to that pretty quickly. And so you'll see here, I even put the example, a guy in a heavy coat on a hot day might be trouble, most likely. Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So then you need to decide, what's your course of action. This is you practicing the OODA loop yourself. And it always comes back to distance equals safety. So getting as far away from the danger as possible, reporting it, or if you can't do any of those things, being prepared to act. And in that case, it comes down to executing whatever you're going to do as calmly as possible. And that's why you have to have training, because otherwise you might go straight to condition black, lock up, and you're no good at that particular point in time. So minimizing distractions is number 2 in here. So that's the phone obsession. No earbuds. You're not going to spot the bad guy if you're flipping through your social media and making posts and talking to people and so on and so forth. You should, when you're in public at this particular point in time, because the threat level is very high, people say have your head on a swivel, and then other people are like, well, what does that mean? It just means paying attention. Pay attention to who's in close proximity to you. Pay attention to body language. Pay attention to what people are wearing. Pay attention to, hey, that guy looks like he's carrying a rifle under that jacket. That's going to be obviously a fairly large red flag. So number 3 on here, I have know your baseline. So every place, has like a normal. So when you normally go to church and you see people talking in the parking lot, and maybe you have multiple sessions throughout the day. So people are coming out, people are going in, they're socializing, they're talking, they're grabbing a coffee and a donut or something like that. When you see something that deviates like from that, so somebody mulling around by themselves or people mulling around that you don't recognize, Keith Graves will tell you this. Go make contact. Hey, how you doing? I'm Keith Graves. Is this your first time at our church? Ask the question, and you'll know from the reaction whether or not that person has good intentions or bad intentions. Another part to this is people not making eye contact. This is one of the things that Israeli security looks for in their airports. There's never been a plane hijacked from an Israeli airport in history because they profile like a son of a gun. Again, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And they're not so married to political correctness that they won't profile. They do. They absolutely profile people. So if somebody's not making eye contact, they're dressed strangely, they're a stranger to your church, they're carrying a big bag or even any type of bag, that's got to trigger you or somebody on your security team at your church to go ask that person, go contact that person and find out what's going on. And the next thing to do I have on here is train your senses. So visual drills. So you can do this by yourself or you can do it with your family, but you can play a game, spot the oddity, spot the odd thing that's in our particular, location that we're at, and identify what looks like it's unusual. So a parked car at your church with somebody sitting in it with the engine running for an extended period of time, somebody needs to go and make contact with that person. That's not normal, especially if it's somebody that you don't recognize. Pay attention listening. I've got an anecdotal story to tell you on this, but pay attention to sounds, people shouting, glass breaking, anything that comes out of the blue. So we had a warning from multiple SO sheriff's offices here in Florida 6, 7, 8 months ago saying that TDA, Tren de Aragua, was moving up the Florida peninsula. So they'd established a base in Miami. We're moving up the peninsula. And one of the things that they were doing was kidnapping women and children in parking lots for grocery stores and other stores. So my wife and I on a Sunday, we go to Sam's. It's not super busy. Parking lot's not super packed. We get out of the truck and all we can hear is this kid screaming. And we're looking all over. We don't see the kid. We don't see any parents chastising kids. We don't see any vehicles peeling away. And it was one of those situations where the hair stood up on both of our necks. Like, did we just hear a child being abducted? Because it's not the number 1 or 2, but it's the number 3 way that children end up getting drawn into child sex trafficking is being snatched in public places. To this day, we don't know what happened there. We walked around the parking lot. We looked to see if we could find anything out of line, but for all we know, the child was abducted and the people got out of there quickly because we didn't see them, but we were listening and it really stood out to us. And as you can see right here, trust your gut. If something feels off, don't ignore it. We're the only living sentient beings on the planet that will ignore our gut instinct. Tony Blauer, who's a good personal friend of mine, loves to say that every single person who survived a violent attack went on to say something didn't feel right. Every single person. My wife watches this documentary series, and it has to do with people who survived these crazy attacks. And Tony's right. Every single one of them will say, well, it just didn't seem right. You got to trust your gut instinct on that stuff. It'll serve you well. Next one on here, number 5, learn body language. So, study the basic clues. Somebody who's sweating profusely, avoiding eye contact, which I mentioned. Maybe they've got clenched fists. Typically, those types of reactions, behavior is caused by stress. So what are they stressing over? If you're at church, go make contact with them and introduce yourself, see what they've got to say. There's a book called What Everybody Is Saying by Joe Navarro that I put in here. I recommend that. It's a really, really good book that teaches you the basics of analyzing people's body language. Watch for pre-attack indicators. So again, if you're on a phone and this is a bit of an eye test, this is where we're at. So pre-attack indicators would be somebody reaching into a bag, somebody who's studying or staring at security, if security stands out, somebody pacing back and forth. Those are all bad signs, and somebody needs to make contact with them from your church security team. And if you don't have a church security team, and you have some training yourself, go do it. If you don't have training, you don't feel safe, reach out to somebody who does. So the next thing is having a game plan in your mind, like thinking through these scenarios. So what if this thing happens? Where's the nearest exit? You know, let's say it's at your home, somebody breaks in, what's your home defense plan? We covered that last week in Aftermath, 11 a.m. every Saturday for paying subscribers, guardians, as we call them. We discussed all of these things. If it's you and your wife, for example, who live without kids in your home, you have no good reason to leave your bedroom and try clear your home. You're much better off staying in your bedroom, door closed, hopefully door locked, with a firearm. So in our instance, my wife is to go to the master bathroom and get down in the tub that provides her some cover. And when somebody comes through the door into our bedroom, I have a very tactically advantageous position to be in, that they'll never get past the doorway. And the thing is if you don't have these plans and you haven't gone through them in your head, you haven't discussed them, you haven't gone through them as a dry run, the chances of coming up with the right thing to do is pretty slim. So you leave your bedroom, for example, it's nighttime, you're still groggy, the intruder's not groggy, and next thing you know, you're confronted. Something really bad could happen to you at that particular point in time. You can go to our website, survivaldispatch.com, click up top where it says connect, go to free home defense plan. You can download it for free. I think it's a 12-page PDF that we wrote, and that will give you some guidance on that. The next part to this is the power of visualization. So professional athletes will tell you that they visualize countless times them succeeding at whatever their sport is. I competed at a world-class level in powerlifting, and in the 12-week prep up to a world championship, I would visualize myself lifting whatever my goal was, pressing whatever my goal was. And it's super powerful stuff, because when it comes time to do the thing, you've already gone through it thousands of times in your head and you've succeeded, and the body will follow the mind essentially at the end of the day. You can also, if you have kids at home, or if you attend whatever movie with friends, those sort of things, have a discussion on, hey, if something bad happens, like even like a fire, where are the exits? What's our evacuation plan? And you should have that for your church, for that matter. And you should also have at all times some sort of keyword for your family. So I don't know who planted the seed on this with me years ago, but whoever the person was, I can't remember what their name was, their word for their family was avalanche. So let's say the family, wife, children, you're all sitting at a table and the father says avalanche. That means stop eating, put your utensils down, get out of the restaurant, and you go the opposite direction to the way that I go, so I can hopefully draw the attention of whatever's going on. But if you haven't discussed these things in advance, seconds count, and distance equals safety. So in those instances, and again, it's like me covering these potential attack scenarios earlier tonight, being aware of them is key to you making a decision earlier rather than later. So you can get out of Florida, for example, before I-95 is a parking lot, or you can get out of the restaurant before something goes down. But I would encourage you to have some sort of word that nobody else will know what it means, to communicate to your family, we have to leave right now, right this second, no questions asked. We're not going to have a discussion over it. We're just going to get up and leave, sort of thing. The next one would be to stay physically and mentally sharp. So we're back to the human beings never rise to the occasion. They fall to their level of training. Mike Sterling loves that. He pounds it into everybody's head. But if you haven't gone through some sort of stress inoculation, so in other words, you go to the range, you're standing there, you shoot your gun, you have familiarity now with the controls, you have the optic dialed in, but that's all you have. You are not prepared for an encounter. And I've shown this video multiple times before. There's a truck jacking that happened in Lumberton, North Carolina a couple years ago. Bad guy jumps in this truck. Good Samaritan tries to stop him, shoots 5 times from 5 feet away and misses every single time. the carjacker backs the truck up, runs over the Good Samaritan and killed him. So we lose our fine motor skills when, your stress level goes up, your heart rate goes up. And if you haven't practiced under those scenarios, the chances that you'll have really good accuracy with shooting or anything like that is very, very low. The next thing, as far as training is concerned, take courses. So there are situational awareness courses and self-defense classes and online webinars. Look up Tony Blauer. If you look at Tony Blauer stuff, the HWS, Human Weapon System, or No Fear, spelled KNOW, No Fear. If you're interested in that, send me an email, support@survivaldispatch.com. I will send you a coupon that gets you 50% all off everything that Tony does. It's all online, and it will help you take your situational awareness to a whole new level. He's got this kick-ass thing he calls D1, D2, D3. Tony Blauer is the one in the 90s who coined the phrase weaponize the flinch. So somebody throws something at you, you don't have to think. You just automatically, you're going to try and block it, right? So his whole thing is that if you just flinch to protect yourself, you need to go on the attack immediately. Don't let that person close the gap. Don't retreat. Bad things will happen to you in those cases, hence the term weaponize the flinch. And let me just give you the basics of D1, D2, D3. So D1 says that you detect a problem from a distance. So let's say you're in the church parking lot, you're 100 feet from the front door of the church, and you see something that looks suspicious. Retreating and calling the authorities or calling the church security team is the best thing that you can do. The best fight you can get in is the fight that doesn't happen. So that's D1, which essentially means to detect and avoid. Number 2, D2 is to devalue yourself. So he loves to tell the story of this lady who took one of his workshops in person in California, Los Angeles. And she called Tony like 10 years after this happened. And she says to Tony, she says, "Hey, I took your workshop 10 years ago. You saved my life last night." And Tony's like, "Really? How did I save your life?" She says, "Well, I was on a conference call. It was the end of the workday. I left the office. I got in my car. I'm driving down the interstate. The light goes off on my dash, says I'm out of fuel. I pull off the interstate. I pull into a gas station. I'm still on this conference call. She gets out of the car and all of a sudden notices that she's in the wrong part of town and 3 bad guys have taken an interest in her and are walking towards her." So she thought back to the training from Tony, and D2 means devalue yourself. So she starts cussing into the phone. "I paid my credit card bill last month. Turn my effing credit card back on again. I'm stuck at this gas station. I've got no gas. I've got no cash. And now you've turned my dang credit card off. Turn my credit card back on." The 3 guys walked away. The car was out of fuel. She had no cash and her credit card didn't work. So she had devalued herself as a target. It's kudos to her. And if you look up Tony Blauer's Substack, there's actually some videos that he did on that particular subject. And the third one, D3, is when you actually have to defend yourself. And we're kind of come back to the OODA loop here: observe, orient, decide, and act. So Tony lives in LA. He gets rear-ended at a stoplight, pushes his car into the guy's car in front of him. The driver gets out of the car in front of him. 2 of his friends get out of the other side. The guy looks at his bumper where Tony's vehicle was pushed into. It looks back at Tony and says, "I'm going to kick your ass." And as he's approaching Tony, and Tony's about my size, Tony said, whoa, time out. There's 3 reasons I can't fight you right now. It interrupted the guy's OODA loop. He stopped to listen to what Tony had to say. Tony sucker punched him and knocked him out cold. The other 2 guys got back in the car and a confrontation. So you can learn a lot of this stuff from Tony. He's a preeminent expert on it. Again, Tony Blauer, Blauer. If you decide you want to do the HWS Human Weapon System, or you decide you want to do No Fear, again, send an email to support@survivaldispatch.com, and I will give you a coupon that takes 50% off of that stuff. All right, next one up here. I did have in here that FEMA has some free online courses as well at ready.gov. I wouldn't call them super advanced, but they cover the basics. They cover the basics of what you should have in place if a hurricane's approaching, tornadoes, those sort of things. So it's free and it's at ready.gov. Number 9, use tools wisely. So you should carry some sort of flashlight at all times. This is a little bit big, and so is this one. I've got some smaller ones that I like to carry on a regular basis. And again, there's some psychology behind this, by the way. So go back to the girl that Philip Tapino was training, and he's teaching her to use the flashlight to interrupt somebody's OODA loop. There's a lot of studies that these guys have done, Tony, Philip Tapino, and others, that when you flash that flashlight, what goes through the other person's mind, in addition to their OODA loop being interrupted, is that they start to think, I wonder what other tools this person has at their disposal. And just a quick tip on that point, by the way, when you're confronted by somebody like that, you should be watching 2 things: hands and pockets the whole time. If they're going to go for a weapon, a knife, a gun, whatever the case may be, you need to be paying attention to hands and pockets all the time. But again, a flashlight, pretty powerful to interrupt somebody's OODA loop and also plant the seed that, this person might have more tools at their disposal. And generally speaking, now that you've taken away the element of surprise, they're probably going to leave you alone. Philip showed us this really cool video over at WAFT where tigers were going up this watering hole that was full of crocodile, saltwater crocs. And every tiger in the world, I didn't know this until Philip taught us this, when it bent its head down, or all of them do, and their ears flop over, they have a pattern in their fur on the back of their ears that looks like 2 eyeballs. So when they go like this and you have a crocodile that has a brain the size of a walnut, it can't differentiate between the two, and it thinks that the tiger's still looking at it. So it thinks it does not have the element of surprise anymore. And there's a potential chance that the alligator then will leave that particular animal alone. Number 10 on here, build community awareness. So talk to your neighbors, church groups, keeping an eye open for suspicious activity. We had some people in our neighborhood. We live on the outskirts of town in a very old subdivision. And there were some people walking through the neighborhood that just didn't belong. And this is not a race thing. These were, white trash. And everybody who my wife talks to, the ring group sort of thing, they all took notice of it, took pictures of it. And somebody, I have to assume, contacted them, went out and made contact with them, because all of a sudden they stopped appearing in our neighborhood, but they were just casing stuff, right? I want to give you the Department of Homeland Security's number again for the See Something, Say Something hotline, 866-347-2423, 866-347-2423. And I'm going to throw that into the chat here on the software we use called StreamYard. So it'll send it to every platform but Rumble. I'll put it in Rumble separately over here. That's the DHS line right there. So make a note of that, save it in your phone. And the next thing, number 11, last one, is to get your concealed weapons permit, get professional firearms training, and then train on a regular basis to keep your skills sharp. These are perishable skills. You don't have to spend a gazillion dollars on ammunition. There's all kinds of dry fire options out there. There's the Blackbeard X from Mantis that you can use with an AR. So it resets your trigger, it connects to your phone. It tells you what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, measures things like barrel travel before, during, and after the trigger pull. Mantis X have a new product called Titan X that's going to be released to market on May the 5th. And it's a pistol that's in different formats. So Glock 19, Glock 17, Glock 43, SIG P365, et cetera, and it resets the trigger automatically, just like the Blackbeard X does. So you can go practice with the pistol. I have one of them. I have one of the pre-release ones, and I'm not allowed to show any videos on it until it launches on May 5th. You'll be happy to do that when that day comes around. But the Titan X from Mantis, by the way, $199 price point. So it doesn't take long to chew through $199 in ammo. Is dry fire training as good as live fire? No, but it's a darn good option. It's something you can do inside your house, outside your house. Do it while you have an elevated heart rate. Do some sort of activity, get your heart rate up and start shooting. You'll be amazed at how not accurate you are if you've never gone through this stuff before. But practice makes perfect. The more reps you get, the better that you will do. And, you know, you've got to do this on a regular basis. So I want to show you something here briefly. So you'll be able to hear in the background of this video, and if you look at my shirt when I move away from the camera here, was pouring rain out. And I go out and I train in the pouring rain. I train at nighttime. I'm blind in my left eye. It's a prosthetic eye. So nighttime introduces all sorts of different challenges. But this is only a 30-second video, and it will show a Unit Solutions training rifle. So this is not a real rifle. This is strictly for training. It shoots 8mm kinetic rounds. It's powered by air, but it's way more than an airsoft gun. Has simulated recoil, 30-round mags, so you can do mag swaps like you would normally, but it takes this thing called a T-pack, and the CO2 cartridge will still have over 50% of its gas in it when you're done shooting 30 rounds, so they can maintain a constant velocity and accuracy. So when I measured on a chronograph, we've got a few different chronographs. A couple of them are Doppler radar. 425 feet per second is what we get out of them. So it's a great training implement. Call it from, 30, 35 feet and in. So as far as CQB is concerned, in your house and everything. But here's the Unit Solutions training rifle, kinetic rounds, pouring rain. Takes 30 seconds just for this small little section. So you can hear the rain in the background. So it took me a pretty decent amount of time and coaching from Carl Cottle to be able to walk and shoot accurately with only having one eye. When I look through the sight picture, I have no peripheral, and it makes it hard for me to walk and move at the same time. But there's an example of practice makes perfect. Didn't miss a single shot. You can see I'm out of breath because behind the camera, what you can't see is a bunch of bands and dumbbells, and I do all these exercises in between, and it's high intensity. Intensity trumps duration. You don't have to go out and train for hours on end. If you train like that, with a couple simple exercises, 20 minutes, 3 times a week, you will improve dramatically. I train 5-6 days a week and for a longer period of time, but I don't have to go to the gym because everything I do is run and gun training. So let me get back to our SITREP here. I got one last thing that I want to share with you all here. And this is a recent post that Keith, our friend at Christian Warrior Training, published. It's not very old. It was April the 4th. So 15 days ago, about 2 weeks. Threat intelligence briefing. So if you go to christianwarriortraining.com, that will get you to Keith's Substack, and you'll see all kinds of articles on the front page. Last time I checked, this one was at the bottom of the front page, but if you don't see it at the bottom of the front page, just click the arrow to go to the next page of articles. This is it. If you look at the bar on the side of my screen, you can see this is a really long article. But Keith, again, 30-year law enforcement officer in the Bay Area. He was a SWAT team leader, a drug and gang interdiction specialist. This is in his wheelhouse 100%. And when he gives you this type of training and insight for free, it's a good thing. So I would highly suggest that you go check him out on Substack, and it's at christianwarrior.com, and check out that particular piece of information. And that's it for chapter 1, kind of all over the place tonight with no sidekick and no producer, but we got through it. And again, if you go to patreon.com/survivaldispatch or survivaldispatchnews.com, sign up as a guardian, Patreon or Substack, you get the same paid content, and you'll get this SITREP that has all the links in it. And for those of you who are new, we're going to play a message right now from one of our sponsors. Then we're going to go into chapter 2, and I go through that pretty quickly. It's just a number of headline news items. And then we'll go to chapter 3, which is funny, zany stuff. I like to leave people with a smile on their face. But I've got a short message here from our friends at CCW Safe, and I will be right back. Necessity truly is the mother of all invention. And there's so many successes like yours where the product didn't exist, the company didn't exist, and you had to invent it yourself to
Yeah.
fill that void.
What we provided, even at the time when we started CCW Safe, it was really better than what most officers were getting through their unions or departments. And you mentioned earlier about competitors. I fully believe that whatever, all of our competitors are going to do exactly what they say they're going to do. It's just we do it a little different. We're not an insurance company or a critical response team. We're really the only one in the industry that has a dedicated critical response team like we have. And that first 48 hours is so important to lock down. So we just do things differently.
So I want to just pick up where Mike left off there quickly. Mike is one of the founders, by the way. So we spent 18 months going back and forth with all the different self-defense companies before we settled on CCW Safe. And the reason we settled on them more than anything else is what he just said there. We fully expect, or he fully expects, their competitors to do exactly what they've told you that they're going to do. And that means doing your due diligence and reading through their contract. So most of the other offerings out there sell you self-defense insurance. And let's say you're in the unfortunate situation of being in a citizen-involved shooting, and it gets right down to the wire, and the DA says to your attorney, I'll give your client this plea deal where we're going to court. 95% of the time, your attorney is going to say, take the deal. Don't risk going to court and spending decades in jail, even though you didn't commit a crime. The second you sign that plea agreement, you're admitting to committing a crime. It is against the law to issue insurance benefits when somebody's breaking the law. They just spent $400,000 defending you. You have to give the $400,000 back at that point in time. You lose your representation for the civil trial that will surely follow the criminal trial, and you don't have any coverage for a payout. So CCW Safe, the top package is $47 a month, but when you sign up, your spouse gets covered automatically. So it's $23.50 a month. They have a rapid response team that nobody else has. And I'll just tell you something that was taught to me years ago. If you get in a shooting and you call 911, do not ever say that you shot somebody. And I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. This is the advice that was given to me. You say to them, I need you to send 2 ambulances. There's been a shooting and I'm having extreme chest pains. I think I'm having a heart attack. This is what happens to many law enforcement officers thanks to their unions negotiating this. Why? So when the 2 squads show up and they put you in one to take you to the hospital, that has just bought you some time and not subjected you to being interviewed or interrogated by the cops and saying something that's going to screw you down the line. On your way to the hospital, you or your wife can call CCW Safe. They're going to dispatch people. Whether you take a plea deal or not, there's no recoupment clause because they don't sell you insurance. You go to civil trial, and let's say you get $1 million judgment against you. They pay the $1 million plus they defend you. They're by far and away the best option out there. The insurance stuff is pretty shady. I'm not going to mention names. Look at the fine print of your policies. And there's one big one out there that is not insurance that's kind of similar to CCW Safe, but they don't cover the payouts on civil judgments. So if you get a civil judgment against you, they're not going to help you with it whatsoever. Alrighty, let's jump into chapter 2 here. And the first article that I have up is cash-strapped Hamas can't pay fighters as Israeli offensive hits funding sources. So remember what I said about Unit 910 for Hezbollah. Same thing applies to Hamas. If they are not directly, I mean like directly in Iran, they're all tasked with coming up with their own means of generating revenue so that they can go on and commit terrorist attacks. And that's the whole reason that I pulled this up here, is just to put a fine point on it, that if we hit their cash sources, they're not going to get the money from the Iranian government. The Iranian government funds the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, who in turn help Hezbollah and Hamas inside their borders. But once you get outside of their borders, all of these terror cells are self-funding. So Unit 910 in Hezbollah's case. All right, moving on to the next one. I kind of bounced this one back and forth, whether I put it in the second chapter or the third chapter, because this is truly insane. And I think that some people in our society are now starting to draw the conclusion that if they're black and they kill a white person, they might get really rich and they might get a new Escalade and they might get a new home and they might get $500,000 donated to them. But listen to what this guy has to say. And this is why we tell you, always choose safety. Here's a good example based on what this guy has to say. You pull into a gas station, you look at it, you think, something doesn't feel right here. Choose safety. Don't stop and get gas. Go to another gas station down the road where it is safer. Choose safety. Distance equals safety. But these are the types of people you may run into: rest areas, gas stations, anywhere. 45-second video.
Hey, to all of the people who are against Carmelo Anthony, me as a black man in America, white people, I'm telling you and I'm telling you now, you ever even think to approach me, bully me, harass me, think you're going to be with your twin brother or twin whatever, and do anything to me, I too will poke you as well. Straight to the heart. And that's on self-defense. This is not the Jim Crow era. This ain't 400 years ago. This ain't 1619. This ain't back in them days. Y'all don't want to end up like Austin. Leave black people alone. Y'all didn't play fair for 400 years. We ain't playing fair with y'all either.
So, I mean, I could really go to town on this one, and I won't. But what I will say is that Carmelo Anthony is a murderer. He murdered that Austin young lad. There was no reason for him to stab him in the heart. I would also comment that it takes a very sick and evil person to stab somebody to death versus other forms of murder, which are just as illegal. But knifing in particular, you got to be on a demonic level to do that. And these people here who think he was justified in killing that guy, Austin grabbed his book bag and said, "Get out from underneath our tent." He reached in his book bag, pulled a knife out, jammed it through his heart, and killed him. There was no fist fight. There was no reason for him to do that. There was also no reason for him to be under that tent, which was for a different school. And, all we can do is pray that the courts do the right thing and lock that guy up. He's a murderer, full stop. And this stuff here, this fallout of these twisted narratives that are straight up lies, shame on the people who've done this. Shame on them. All right, moving to another one. So if you didn't catch this, yesterday, the White House updated the COVID website. And the COVID website now details the lab leak from Wuhan, China, the origin right here. This is nothing like what this website looked like under the Obama administration, this third Obama administration. And it gives you a plethora of information. I'm kind of curious to see how YouTube's going to react to this, because they still don't allow you to talk about Charlie 19 and any reservations you might have with regards to, any of the things that you might take a little pokey poke from, sort of thing. So it'll be interesting. All right. So next one up, the forgotten economic theory behind Trump's tariffs. This is a really, really good article. So the optimum tariff, the idea behind Trump's trade strategy. For decades, American elites have spoken of free trade as though it were a moral commandment engraved in stone, unquestionable, sacred, eternal. Tariffs, they say, are relics of the past, economic heresy, an automatic road to higher prices, shrinking output, and worldwide retaliation. What they don't tell you, what most of them don't know, is that some of the most brilliant economists in history developed a theory proving exactly the opposite. Under the right conditions, tariffs can make a country richer. This idea goes by the name optimum tariff theory. So essentially what this theory is when you have a country that's in a deficit like us, meaning that we import products from around the world, but very few countries take products that we've produced. And a big part of that is because if we try to ship products to certain countries, they slap us with these ginormous tariffs, 270% on our dairy products going to Canada, for example. But we're supposed to let them have access to our economy with no tariffs. And that's fair to Americans. How? At the end of the day, prior to 1913, the installation of Woodrow Wilson, the first globalist president, there was no IRS. We were the biggest, most sophisticated economy, and it was built on tariffs protecting our local businesses. So we don't seek free trade. Trump's not seeking free trade, seeking fair trade. So how is it fair that Germany has been sending cars over here with virtually no tariffs on them, but if we want to send any vehicles over that way, they charge us huge tariffs? It's completely unfair. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. We have 130 countries at the table now who want to cut a deal with us. There's 190 countries in the entire world. And what's going to happen? You're either going to see the tariffs on both sides drop or tariffs reduced, maybe something like 10% going both directions. But Trump is using this as an opportunity to bankrupt China. And one of the stipulations for those 130 countries is that if you want to deal with America, you can't be buying products from China. China is in deep, deep, deep economic trouble. We've been saying it for 2 years here on Survival Dispatch News. Prior to the tariffs, 60% of their plants were empty. They have massive unemployment. The chances of men who are 40 years old and younger ever marrying, have kids, 50% of them will never have kids, never be married because of the one-child policy and all the years that they basically euthanized any girls and only kept males. It's just a confluence of bad stuff for China. They're in deep, deep trouble, and they've abused us for long enough, so no more. So here's the other part to tariffs. Swiss pharma company announces 23 billion U.S. investment days after Trump pledged major tariff on drug imports. So tariffs are not the thing. Tariffs are the means to an end. Tariffs are the reason that these countries will cut a deal so it's fair trade instead of free trade. Tariffs will drive manufacturing back here. Trump has already secured $5 trillion in investment from foreign countries and companies to set up shop here in the United States. We're looking at the second industrial revolution of America kicking off. We're going to have some short-term pain. And if there's any naysayers in the audience, of course, you're entitled to your opinion. But let me say this. We have lost a whole bunch of contracts recently from Chinese vendors who make things like power stations, because normally at this time of year, we do a lot of educational material on prepping for hurricane season. We had multiple contracts canceled this week by Chinese vendors because they're not spending anything on demand generation here because they can't ship products here, pay big tariffs on them, and be competitive in the marketplace. So there's going to be some short-term pain for people like us. You know what? We'll get past it. We always get past it. We will get past it, and we'll be stronger and better off as a result of that. So I'm not sitting here saying to you guys, suck it up, buttercup. We'll get through this together. I'm saying that we're going through the pain of this. I lost tens of thousands of dollars of contracts this past week that were, every single one of them, by the way, was educational in nature, where it was 20, 30-minute videos done on training people how to use various tools to get prepared for the hurricane season. So it hit me right in the wallet, and I still support it. All right, next piece up, 1992 presidential debate. Ross Perot warned us all as two wolves stood by and sneered with glee. 2 minutes and 24 seconds. I'm going to play most of this. I loved Ross Perot back in the day until he lost his mind partway through the campaign and decided to fire all of his campaign people. He stood a chance before that happened, but he was still very smart from an economic perspective. Here we go.
And I think the first question is over here.
Yes, I'd like to direct my question to Mr. Perot. What will you do as president to open foreign markets to fair competition from American business and here at home from foreign countries so that we can bring jobs back to the United States?
That's right at the top of my agenda. We've shipped millions of jobs overseas, and we have a strange situation because we have a process in Washington where after you've served for a while, you cash in, become a foreign lobbyist, make $30,000 a month, then take a leave, work on presidential campaigns, make sure you got good contacts, and then go back out. Now, if you just want to get down to brass tacks, first thing you ought to do is get all these folks who've got these one-way trade agreements that we've negotiated over the years and say, fellas, we'll take the same deal we gave you. And they'll gridlock right at that point because, for example, we've got international competitors who simply could not unload their cars off the ships if they had to comply. You see, if it was a two-way street, just couldn't do it. We have got to stop sending jobs overseas. To those of you in the audience who are business people, pretty simple. If you're paying $12, $13, $14 an hour for factory workers, and you can move your factory south of the border, pay $1 an hour for labor, hire a young 25, that's assuming you've been in business for a long time, you've got a mature workforce. Pay $1 an hour for your labor, have no health care, that's the most expensive single element making a car, have no environmental controls, no pollution controls, and no retirement, and you don't care about anything but making money, there will be a giant sucking sound going south. So if the people send me to Washington, the first thing I'll do is study that 2,000-page agreement and make sure it's a two-way street. One last point here. I decided I was dumb and didn't understand it, so I called a who's who of the folks who've been around it. And I said, why won't everybody go south? They said, we'll be disruptive. I said, for how long? I finally got them up for 12 to 15 years. And I said, well, how does it stop being disruptive? And that is when their jobs come up from $1 an hour to $6 an hour and ours go down to $6 an hour, then it's leveled again. But in the meantime, you've wrecked the country with these kinds of deals. We got to cut it out.
Thank you, Mr. Perot. I see that.
Very well said on Ross's behalf there. At the end of the day, tariffs are a means to an end. We're going to come out on this way further ahead. We are changing the game globally. We're going to repatriate all of that stuff here. And what's also important from that perspective is, besides the bravery of the greatest generation, one of the primary reasons we won World War II was our industrial capacity. So we took typewriter factories, turned them into gun factories. We took textile plants, they started making parachutes. Big three automobile manufacturers stopped making private vehicles, started making military vehicles. Right now, we have 0.5% of the world's ability to build ships. China has 50%. That is a massive weakness on our part, and we need to repatriate this stuff so we're stronger and more self-sufficient, and God forbid can defend ourselves if we get into another large-scale war. All right, next one up from Libs of Tip Talk, Demonic Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, an order of queer and trans nuns, are hosting a transgender Easter event at a public park in San Francisco this weekend, which includes a Hunky Jesus and Foxy Mary drag contest and events for children. They literally say that their show is inappropriate for children while still encouraging children to attend. Make it make sense. So I don't know what to say other than this is not the values that the vast majority of us believe in. These are not legitimate traditional American Christians. They're a bunch of mentally ill people, not to put too fine of a point on it. All right, next one. So I touched on this earlier. So Eric Schmidt, former Attorney General of Missouri, senator now from Missouri. Until yesterday, the Biden administration's plan for countering domestic terrorism was classified. Now, thanks to Tulsi Gabbard, it's public. It's a roadmap for left-wing ideological warfare. So strategic implementation plan for countering domestic terrorism. Essentially what this was a document and set of guidelines that said middle-aged white guys were the devil incarnate and that we were this huge threat from a terrorism standpoint. Like I said, when Keith was teaching federal agencies and they'd start spewing this stuff, he said everybody in the room would start laughing and say, you guys are out to lunch. You're pushing a false narrative. This is just not the case. And it was kind of funny, Keith said, to see this stuff happening. But if you go find Eric Schmidt, so Eric_Schmidt, on X, you can read this or go grab the SITREP, one or the other. It's a good thread that you will learn a lot from. So speaking of politicians and craziness, so here's a photo of a sitting United States senator shaking hands with a wife beater and MS-13 gang member. There's no going back from this for the Democrat Party. So we have two courts that have said he's a member of MS-13. ICE says he's MS-13. Other law enforcement agencies who've had him in custody or charged him for things over the year say he's an MS-13. He's got MS-13 tattoos across his knuckles, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But this is the hill that the Democrats want to choose to die on. What they're absolutely insane. Look at this guy. I mean, you can tell just by looking at this guy, he's some sort of, weak, unmasculine soy boy, for lack of a better term. This is kind of funny. I wonder if he likes to cuddle. Look at the way he's looking at this guy. It's all political grandstanding. There's some other politician from Maryland who's supposedly headed down that way. Complete insanity. So we got a short video here, minute and 36 seconds long. And Scott Jennings, God bless him, does a great job on that Senator Chris Van Hollen.
Van Hollen posted a picture of him sitting with Abrego Garcia at a table.
I see these pictures tonight, and I think, boy, the party of women is really covering itself in glory tonight. I mean, I don't understand why the American left falls in love with the worst people. You've got a gang-banging, human trafficking, wife-beating, illegal alien, and a United States senator in a ludicrous display of energy is in El Salvador having Mai Tais and Yahtzee. I do not get it. I do not understand why the left takes on the heroes. I don't get it. I think he has an adjudicated deportation order, and you have Democrat public officials falling all over themselves trying to get him back here without thinking through the next step, which is he's literally going to be deported somewhere else.
But he did have due process. Everything we know about him is documented because he did go through the court systems. He was stopped for trafficking. His wife did file these domestic violence charges against him. He was arrested with MS-13 members with a roll of cash that had the eyes and the ears and the mouths of the presidents erased, which is an MS-13 markings. This is all non-disputed.
Average American looking at this case, a lot of conflicting information. Okay, I believe some, I don't believe. An illegal alien came here in 2011, and somehow in 2025, he's still here after having been through the court system, after having been arrested with lots of people in his car, after having all this evidence.
Deport him?
He just did, and now everybody's mad about it.
Why didn't
How did
Donald
an
Trump
illegal
deport
alien
him?
take advantage of our system for 14
Why
years
didn't
and
Donald
not
Trump
get
deport
away?
him?
Just, I don't know what to say. Unbelievable stuff. But check this out. Trump posts photo of illegal aliens' knuckle tattoos amid MS-13 charges. So you've got marijuana, M. You got a smiley face, S. Then you got a 1 and a 3, MS-13. You don't get to put these types of tattoos on your body unless you're a member. It'd be a good way to get beat up, potentially killed, if you were to use those types of tattoos and not be a member of MS-13. The Democrats have completely lost their mind on this one. Next one up, Stephen Miller on Chris Van Hollen. This is on the same topic, minute and 55 seconds. I'm probably going to play the whole thing just because Stephen Miller is so articulate and puts together great arguments.
I'm almost at a loss for words for how egregious it is. Here's an individual, the man who has been deported to his home country of El Salvador, who has been repeatedly documented by multiple federal and state authorities to be a member of MS-13, one of the most violent and ruthless criminal organizations on planet Earth, which is now a designated foreign terrorist organization, and an individual who has been incredibly implicated in human smuggling and human trafficking, an individual who is a documented woman beater, somebody who has viciously assaulted a woman in ways that shock the human conscience. That is who the Democrat Party is going to provide aid, solace, and comfort to, not to Senator Van Hollen's own constituents, like the Morin family. Rachel Morin was viciously beaten, brutally raped, and murdered, and her mother never even got a phone call from Senator Van Hollen. Or Kayla Hamilton, a young girl who was attacked in a public restaurant, raped in the bathroom, and beaten to death and murdered by an illegal alien that Joe Biden set free into the country. None of those people elicit human sympathy from Senator Van Hollen. How broken is that man's heart? How broken is his conscience that he doesn't have even an ounce of empathy or time or concern to share with those families? Or how many of his citizen constituents have been killed by the fentanyl that Joe Biden allowed into this country, by the cartels that made a fortune off of human trafficking and smuggling into this country, or the children in his state that cannot even get a good education or a good health care because of the mass migration that has occurred into his state, none of that concerns him in the least. You know, his heart is reserved for an illegal alien who's a member of a foreign terrorist organization.
I don't know that you can put any finer point on that. Mr. Skylight, I want to thank you for your support. I was going to say thank you on the YouTube one, but the battery's dead in my keyboard for my second computer, so I have to do it verbally. But Mr. Skylight 1999, appreciate your support very, very much. All right, next one up. MS-13 gang member in U.S. illegally just sentenced to 11 years in prison for kidnapping and savagely torturing a federal witness with a gun, hammer, and machete inside a Nashville laundromat. These are the heroes of the Democrat Party. 19 seconds.
MS-13 gang member from Honduras was just sentenced to more than 11 years in prison for kidnapping a man in the parking lot of a Nashville laundromat back in 2023. The Department of Justice says the suspect kidnapped the man because he had testified in another gang member's trial. Investigators say he entered the U.S. illegally.
And this is who the Democrats want to stand up for. Somebody please make it make sense. All right, check this out. Most Americans, 74%, support the deportation of illegal immigrants who have committed crimes. And, you know, if you go look up the source down here, you're going to find that they oversampled people on the Democrat side, and they still came up with the overwhelming majority of Americans supporting it. So these activist judges and Democrats supporting gang members is literally mind-blowing. That's who they support in this day and age. All right, another one from CNN. Kills me, the truth bombs that have been dropped recently on CNN. Most Americans support deporting all illegal alien immigrants. A big part of the reason why Americans are increasingly saying the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy. 34 seconds.
Deport all undocumented immigrants. Voters favoring the government trying to deport all 11 million of them. Back in 2016, just 38% of voters wanted the government to try to deport all 11 million undocumented immigrants. Compared to where we are in 2025, 56%, the majority. The American people have come a long way on this issue, much closer to Donald Trump. And I think that's a big part of the reason why Americans are increasingly saying the country is on the right track when it comes to immigration policy, and why Donald Trump's net approval rating on that issue is in the positive.
So 74% want illegals deported that are criminals, and 56% just want the ones who are here illegally deported. They're pretty big numbers. This is not rocket science. I have no idea why these clowns here. So somebody has termed the Democrats Dems 13. By the way, we are going to get a copyright infringement within minutes of this podcast wrapping up. They'll probably block the video. We'll probably have to go back and snip that part out on CommieTube. That is not on the other platforms that we're broadcast to, but CommieTube, absolutely for sure. All right, this one's from our buddy Velcro. Now they want to take away your dogs under the guise of saving the planet from carbon emissions. On a scale of 0 to 100, how likely are you to comply? Mother Jones, dogs have extensive and multifarious environmental impacts, disturbing wildlife, polluting waterways, and contributing to carbon emissions, new research has found. All right, so if you support these lunatics and think that we should get rid of all of our pets, dogs and cats, put a 1 in the chat. If you think these people are literally batshit insane, put a 2 in the live chat, the comment section on whatever platform that you're on. 1, you think they're right. We should get rid of cats and dogs. 2, these people are completely cuckoo. All right, next one up. Georgia Maloney silences reporter, with fearless message for Trump. Together we are stronger. The media wanted a headline about a tariff war with the EU and Trump. Instead, Georgia Maloney, who's the head of Italy, delivered a master class in diplomacy and invited him to Italy. A reporter tried to stir up tension. The retaliatory tariffs that the European Commission passed and then suspended, are they still on the table if you cannot make a deal with President Trump? Maloney didn't blink. I'm sure I can make a deal. She wasn't there to posture or speak for Brussels. I'm here to help on that. I cannot deal in the name of the European Union. A little bit of broken English there. Then she made her move. My goal would be invite President Trump to pay a visit to Italy and understand if there's a possibility when he comes to organize also such a meeting with Europe. Her strategy was simple: talk straight, drop the drama, and find common ground. I think the best way is that we simply speak frankly about the needs that every one of us has and finds ourselves in the middle for. That's useful for all. When asked about her political identity, she didn't back down. Somebody calls me such a Western nationalism. I don't know if it is the right words, but I'm sure that together we are stronger. And she closed with a message that couldn't be clear. And I have to find a way. I'm here to find the best way to make us both stronger on both sides of the Atlantic. So again, while the left-wing media and the Democrats have been hyperventilating over tariffs, they've been completely unable to understand that tariffs are a means to an end. Tariffs will result in fair trade between us and other countries who've been taking advantage of us for years. Tariffs will result in us having manufacturing repatriated to America, good paying jobs for people, plus it makes us a stronger country. We're going to get enough off of tariffs in pretty quick order to cover all of our federal government expenses, which means no more IRS, and we go to the external revenue system. This is the right time to be pursuing this type of policy, and we will come out way further ahead as a result of it. All right, next one up. New Minnesota government fiscal policy analyst busted for causing $20,000 total damage to multiple Teslas. 33-year-old Dylan Brian Adams works for the state of Minnesota Department of Human Services under Governor Tim Walz, Tampon Tim. Adams was arrested after multiple Tesla cameras caught a man slashing the cars. According to his LinkedIn page, Adams has been working for the state of Minnesota for nearly 7 years. He graduated from Johns Hopkins University in 2014. 38-second video of him vandalizing people's property. There's no audio with this, by the way. So this is, of course, one of the security cameras capturing him doing his thing. What a bunch of, I don't know, low IQ lemmings doing their master's bidding. It's pretty crazy stuff. All right, got to stop that. There's some sort of background noise. Next one up. Boasberg admits he doesn't have the power to stop Trump deportation flights in huge Friday night ruling. So if you're watching the other night ago when Jeff MD and I were discussing this, basically people in a party in Texas who wanted to stop these deportations shopped around for a district judge and settled on Boasberg in Washington, D.C. and got Boasberg to issue this bullshit temporary restraining order. And the Supreme Court said not too long after that, you have no jurisdiction. You don't have jurisdiction sitting in Washington, D.C. over what's happening in Texas. I'm telling you right now, these 670 district judges who think that they're on the same level as Donald Trump are in for a rude awakening very soon. So a couple things. Number one, 4 times in the Constitution, the federal judges and courts are referred to as being inferior. They are not at the level of the Supreme Court, which means they are not a co-equal branch of government. Boasberg loves to say, well, I'm equal to the president. No, he's not. He's a bought and paid for activist with a lifetime appointment that none of us voted for. We just voted in overwhelming numbers for Donald Trump and for his policies. And these assholes who were appointed by Obama and other Democrat lackeys think that they're on the same level as the president. They're violating his rights under Article 2 of the Constitution. I will be very happy to see this shut down. One more thing for those who aren't aware of this. The federal courts are a construct of Congress. Not only are they inferior to the Supreme Court, Congress can wipe them out. They can reinvent them. It happened in 1802. And we had a complete overhaul of the court system in 1802, which you're welcome to look up under Jefferson. And essentially, we have the ability to cut off their money. We have the ability to cut off their ability to do certain things. We have the ability to say in legislation and codify it to say these judges cannot issue national level rulings outside of their jurisdiction. We can take the money away and stop funding various courts. Absolutely insane that these judges think that they have the right to overrule the duly elected president of the United States. Can't wait to see this particular problem fixed. Alrighty, that is it for chapter 2. We're now into chapter 3. Some, funny, zany, ha-ha stuff. So somebody took this picture of the Senator Chris Van Hollen from Maryland and inked him up with MS-13 all over it. I don't know. I'm going to pass before I make any more comments on that one. So let's go to the next one, which is a senator that I love. So John Kennedy from Louisiana, 40-second video. God bless Senator Kennedy. He is one funny dude.
He's about as popular as chlamydia. Latte drinking, avocado toasty. Life is hard, but it's harder when you're stupid. Speak English and stupid. If you hate cops just because of the cops, the next time you get in trouble, call a crackhead. People that would have a picture of the Backstreet Boys tattooed on their lower back. Now, how are you going to review the spending in the federal budget without reviewing the spending? Who are upset, I would say with respect, call somebody who cares. They better get used to
Senator Kennedy is absolutely hilarious. All right. So I had never seen these things before, but these are big butt sheep. Minute and 1 second. I'm going to play the whole video. This is pretty funny stuff. Pretty crazy.
Every tourist who visits Altay can't help but be drawn to the sight of these sheep's behinds, and most can't resist reaching out to give them a gentle poke because their butts are just unbelievably bouncy.
Can you just imagine how popular these animals would be in Muslim countries in the Middle East?
And springy. These are the famous Altay fat-tailed sheep. They're well known for their round and massive tails, which alone make up about 1/6 of their entire body. When they walk, their behinds sway from side to side, and the word bouncy couldn't be more fitting to describe their gait. Even a casual wiggle of their body can leave onlookers completely mesmerized. The reason their butts are so large is actually the result of natural selection. Altay has harsh natural conditions and extremely cold winters. In order to survive, these sheep have evolved to store as much energy as possible. The fat-packed tails help them endure the brutal environment. At the same time, their big behinds also help them maintain balance while running.
So the only further comment I have to make on that is there goes the 72 virgins. That's my story. I'm sticking to it. And Donald Trump was recently seen wheeling Joe Biden out of the White House. Oh, you gotta love AI. That is some funny shit right there. All right, next one up. Letitia James is not happy after getting busted for mortgage fraud. Hello, Trump. You messed with the wrong queen of blackness. You're going to need 2 prison cells for that fat ass. She is so out of line. I can't wait to see her getting hammered on this mortgage fraud stuff. From Illuminati bot, still more believable than the official story. Dragon burning down the World Trade Centers. All right, next one up. Back to Letitia James. Miguel Fornia says, I had no idea how angry she really was. 30 seconds.
Meine Arbeit für richtig Geld. Ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich mich in diesen Jahren für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig meine Zeit verwendet habe im Dienste meines Volkes. Gib du jetzt eine Stimme ab. Wenn ja, dann tritt für mich ein, so wie ich für dich eingetreten bin.
Oh, she is cruising big time. All right. So question here is, why would anyone ever vote for a Democrat again? A rise in sexual assaults by migrants is a price worth paying to end racism. Let me read that again. A rise in sexual assaults by migrants is a price worth paying to end racism. Quasi-consensual encounters between refugees and white Western women may help with assimilation, says one Harvard academic. These people are batshit insane. There's no other way to put it. The next one up from Chris Pavlovsky, the CEO and founder of Rumble. Google crushed in court as judge rules it illegally built ad tech monopoly. So years ago, Google bought a company called DoubleClick. DoubleClick were like the most nefarious advertising mafia out there. They adopted all of their evil practices, following you around the internet, stealing information from your microphone when you're talking to people, or monitoring what you were listening to, selling it to advertising companies. The list goes on and on. Good to see Google hopefully being cut down a notch or two. All right, next one up. She sure showed him. 16 seconds.
Fuck you, dog.
You're the one swerving. I was just following you.
I'm the one swerving?
Oh,
I'm the one fucking swerving?
yeah, it was actually... Oh, there she goes. And, okay.
Fuck you, dog.
You're the one swerving. I was just following you.
I'm the one swerving?
Unreal. Justice, I suppose. Check this one out. Buddy, this is your sign to get off the bench and start moving. Some people have zero survival instincts. So think back to chapter 1 tonight. We were talking about situational awareness, paying attention to what's going on around you. Look at this guy. He's sitting there watching cops running around with rifles and doesn't see the need to maybe seek some cover. I mean, that's a prime example of zero situational awareness. Unbelievable. All right. Horrified by inhumane conditions, Tim Walz arrives at El Salvadorian prison to ensure inmates have access to menstrual products. Tampon Tim doing his thing, spreading tampons in men's restrooms, men's prisons. And next one up. If black people think they can become rich and famous from attacking or killing white people, that's exactly what they'll do. This whole thing that's going on in Frisco, North Texas, out of control. Absolutely out of control. And if you go back to the day that it happened and you listen to the interviews of the day that it happened, there was no assault committed by the young man, Austin, who got killed with the guy who killed him, stabbed him in the heart. You have to be extremely evil to stab somebody to death. He deserves the death penalty himself, is what he deserves. All right, next one up. Liberal women, the least happy in loneliness in America, according to a new survey. Well, from the no shit Batman department. I mean, you have 62% of white females under the age of 40 who admit to taking SSRIs, so mood enhancing drugs. If 62% admit to it, it's probably more like 82%. These poor guys, like poor young guys looking for a wife or a girlfriend, and under 40, the pickings are slim. All right. And this is how Democrats do it. Government creates the crisis so it can rescue you with the loss of freedom. So the first thing you do in life is decide what you want. Next thing you do is decide what you're willing to give up to get it. So if it just saves one life, then it's worth giving up our civil liberties. They've been doing this for eons. If it just saves one life, how about process of natural selection? Here's a thought. And this seems rather apropos for this weekend. Sadly, you can read a Bible in prison, but not in school. Perhaps if they read it in school, they wouldn't be in prison. Imagine that. All right. Next one up from James Woods. Why is Fox News catering to the madness and referring to every tranny as she? There is no such thing as a trans woman. There are dysphoric transvestite men, and responsible journalists should stop enabling their mental illness. To ask us to participate in the insanity is nuts. Could not agree more. Next one up. So according to the Retard Finder, our friend the Retard Finder, we love the Retard Finder, says this is a perfect 10 out of 10 retard then that you must watch. It is shockingly stupid. Minute and 30 seconds. I don't know that we're going to get through the whole thing, but we'll get through a part of it at least.
Womanhood does not exist without trans women. I'll say that again. Womanhood does not exist without trans women. Without trans women, womanhood is not a choice. Gender becomes a fucking prison. Okay, a cage constructed of oppressive binaries designed by white supremacy and built by the patriarchy and facilitated by cis white women. And trans women had previously busted down the doors to those fucking cages and released us to a world of autonomy and opportunity and choice. And there is no limit to the amount of rights and privileges that trans women have fought for and afforded us. Furthermore, nobody respects, values, understands, or embodies womanhood more than trans women. Because how else do you explain relinquishing that proximity to power, the perceived male privilege, in pursuit of womanhood? In pursuit.
That's enough. I can't listen to this crap anymore. These people seriously are absolutely nuts. All right, next one up. Austin Metcalf's father escorted out of Carmelo Anthony's family news conference after unexpected appearance. You know what's not cool, Bobby? Treating victims' families like they are the family of the killer and the killer's family like they are the victims here. Truth. And the next one up. Oh, wow, this one is really crazy. So woman on a panel of 10 claims Kyle Rittenhouse murdered 3 black people. Not the case. There were no black people involved. And not a single person fact checks her. My mind is blown at how many people know nothing about the Rittenhouse case. The comments were made during a debate on whether or not Carmelo Anthony should walk free for killing Austin Metcalf. For those who are unaware, Kyle Rittenhouse was found not guilty on all 5 charges because he was acting in self-defense. The 2 individuals who were killed were white. The other man who was injured was also white. I'm not playing this whole video, but I'll play enough that you can see just how retarded this woman is.
Name a white person that killed a black person that is not or have not been held accountable in the last 5 years.
George Zimmerman.
George Zimmerman wasn't even white.
Just say one thing. I just want to answer your question. Who killed who or whatnot. Kyle Rittenhouse was 17 years old, white boy that murdered two or three black kids in Michigan during a protest. He was acquitted on all charges. Jordan Penny.
That was Wisconsin, by the way.
I think
he lived in Wisconsin. He traveled to Minnesota, pardon me.
That's his name. He choked out that black homeless man on a train in New York recently. Was also acquitted of charges. So, and
no,
I guess
neither one of those was killed. Stop.
You know, but he was pointing out like why there could be. I know you don't think it's true, but there could be like a sense of white power supremacy in this country, because sometimes when white people do certain crimes, they're not held to the same
yeah, that's enough of that shit. And Disney's announced this is what the next Snow White's going to look like. Snow White and the 7 goats. Maybe they should use those, like 7 of those sheep with the big butts. Just a thought. All right. And Pepe Revere, hurry up, fag. We're doing Patriot shit. That's a good one. And next one up. Not all men just want sex. Some just want to walk and talk about throwing communists out of helicopters. That'll work. And next one up. I'm going to play this instead of reading it. It's 4 minutes. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I will play a portion of it. It's basically, I'm done apologizing for being an American.
You want to know what I'm tired of? I'm tired of apologizing to the world that I am an American. I just watched 3 videos that should shake every American to the core. In the first video, I saw a man in Dearborn, Michigan, standing on U.S. soil and said, "Western power systems must fall." In the second video, they chanted, "Death to America." And in the third, a Muslim man walked into a Christian church and shouted, "Allahu Akbar." Then he began to pray to another God in the house of the Lord.
We do feel like change needs to come, because change must come. And in the form that it must come is that this empire, the American empire that's been hurting our people since the beginning, the imperial Western powers that have been hurting our people since the beginning, they must fall.
This is why he would say to pour all of your chants and all of your shouts upon the head of America.
Yeah, I'm going to stop it there. We don't need to watch the rest of that. But the sentiments are good on his part. We shouldn't be apologizing for being American. All right, that is the end of chapter 3. We're in the home stretch here. So we've got some homework. What can you do in light of the main topic of the night, which is the rising terrorist threat here in the homeland, most likely going to be perpetuated by radical Islamic groups. Possible there could be some lone wolf stuff, but I would say the biggest threat is organized attacks from Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, because they have multiple cells, and when they light them up, it'll be multiple attacks in multiple locations simultaneously. So what can you do? And you know what? I'm going to put up my screen just so you can see what it looks like in the SITREP here. So the average American can take practical steps to reduce vulnerability to terrorist attacks while staying grounded in reality. Focus on situational awareness, which we discussed at length in chapter 1. Pay attention to your surroundings, especially in crowded places like malls, concerts, or public transit. If something feels off, like unattended bags or sketchy behavior, trust your gut and report it to the authorities, local police, and DHS hotlines. So I gave it to you earlier. I'm going to do it again. 866-347-2423. 866-347-2423. That's the DHS hotline. You can also go to patreon.com/survival dispatch, or you can go to survivaldispatchnews.com. That second one takes you to our Substack. $9.99 a month or $95 a year. You get 2.5 months for free when you pay for the year. You get all of our daily sit reps like this, as every single link and article and commentary that we go through on our podcasts. If you don't have time to watch the whole podcast, you don't even have time to read everything there, you can cherry pick from it whatever you want. You also get an invite to our Signal chat, which just is insanely heavily trafficked, a bunch of like-minded individuals, beyond camaraderie. There's a ton of intel and information shared there, and you get an invite to Saturday morning aftermath sessions. These are private webinars for Guardians. We cover topics like today we did alternate communications, how you can achieve communications using alternate means other than cell phones, those sort of things. And last week we did preparing your home defense plan. Next week we're doing some self-defense stuff. And you get additional stuff above and beyond that, but that's the gist of it. Okay, next one up on things you can do. Learn basic first aid, know how to stop bleeding, or do CPR. In a crisis, you might save yourself or someone else before help arrives. FEMA's got free resources on emergency preparedness. I've mentioned earlier, ready.gov. Stock a small go bag with essentials, water, food, flashlight, meds in case you need to move fast. If you're in a high-risk area, no evacuation routes. So we're very big proponents of get home bags. Average American works 15 miles from home, and the 83% of Americans live in cities, do not have somewhere to bug out to. So the prospect of having a bug out bag to go somewhere, it's not really sound. But needing to get home, we will see terrorist attacks just like 9/11, 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, Tuesday morning, any weekday for that matter. So they can inflict the most chaos. You need to be able to get home. If on the off chance we get hit with an EMP and the cars don't work, how do you get home? A coronal mass ejection, a terrorist attack, the list goes on. So there's different ways of thinking about this. We're covering this in an upcoming aftermath webinar session. basically my position is I'm going to stock the truck with all kinds of stuff. And we have a get home bag, which I have a couple get home bags. Depending on how far from home we are, will dictate what we put in the get home bag before we hit the Ankle Express and start making our way home. So for example, 15 miles. If we're 15 miles from home, I am not carrying stuff like tents or anything like that. I'm not carrying a huge ton of food. I'll have water and ways to purify water with some snacks, but I can walk 15 miles in a day, and so can you most likely. And having that get home bag that has ways to defend yourself, the liquids to get home, paper maps, which most people, youngins at least, don't even know how to read anymore, a way to charge up your cell phone and keep it charged up, whether it's a small power bank, whatever the case may be. But let's say you're 40 miles from home. Well, now you got to think differently as far as what you're going to put in your get home bag. And again, we're covering this soon in one of the Saturday morning webinars. I can't remember the exact date on it, but we have 8 weeks mapped out in ahead of us as far as those sessions are concerned. All right, third one, on the broader level, stay informed without drowning in fear. Check primary sources like FBI or DHS alerts. I kind of waffled on putting FBI in there. I guess so with Kash Patel there, but DHS definitely. The links that I gave you all as far as their alert system are worthwhile. So credible threats, not just posts that you can't back up on X. I see frequently something comes up on X and one of our guardians in the Signal chat will say, hey, can anybody else confirm this? And sometimes it's legit and sometimes it's not. And the group identifies it and we carry on from there. If you're pro Second Amendment, concealed carry, I have to put this in for legal purposes where legal. I'm not an attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice. I can tell you that I consulted for the University of Central Florida, SBA and SBDC for many years. And I carried every single time I was on campus. I'm not going somewhere that's a gun-free zone to carry no gun to get killed. And the funny thing is some of the staff who work there, they'd say, you've got a gun with you again today. And I'd say, no, I have guns with me today. And they'd laugh, but they felt a whole lot safer when I was there to conduct meetings than when I wasn't there, because again, this seems like really basic, easy stuff. If a bad guy's going to attack you, let me see, would he go somewhere that's a gun-free zone? You think? All right. So on that topic though, get professional training, train on a regular basis, train in scenarios where your heart rate is elevated. I got kicked off a range years ago. It was an action bay. I pulled my truck out into the range and I was practicing drawing my gun from a magnetic holder under the dash and shooting out left-hand side. One of these retirees with too much time on their hands pulled a power trip on me and kicked me off of that private range, which I had a membership to, and I paid a lot of money for that. But if you're going to get any benefits from your training, it has to mimic real world. Your heart rate has to be up. You have to be in compromised positions. You don't get to choose when the shit hits the fan. You might have to shoot from an irregular stance. And I practice all these things because I love it. It's my hobby, to be quite honest with you. I'm not saying you need to go to that extreme. You can train 20 minutes a day, 3 days a week, and you will be very deadly compared to your peers. All right, last one. Don't expect the government to save you instantly. They're often reactive. Community matters. Know your neighbors, share info, watch each other's backs. Terrorists thrive on chaos, so staying calm and prepared is how you fight back without buying into paranoia or political noise. So with that being said, we are down to the conflicted question of the night. And here's the hypothetical situation. Assault during civil unrest. I chose this one specifically because, an attack is most likely, as I mentioned, Islamic terrorist organizations, but we do have some homegrown problems. Antifa, BLM to a lesser extent these days, but they're still a factor. These pro-Hamas, hands-off people, again, not as sophisticated as, say, ISIS is. but still capable of causing civil unrest. Let's leave it at that. So it's a tense summer day in a mid-sized American city. Protests over a controversial local policy have escalated into sporadic riots in certain neighborhoods. You're a single parent with a 12-year-old daughter heading home from a grocery run in your car. You've taken a detour to avoid the worst of the unrest, but as you stop at a traffic light in a less chaotic area, 3 aggressive individuals, part of a small mob looting nearby stores, approach your vehicle. They're shouting, banging on your windows, and demanding you get out or hand over your groceries. One of them brandishes a knife, and another starts trying to open your locked doors. Your daughter is panicking, clutching her Bible from Sunday school, and you're praying silently for wisdom. You have a concealed carry permit and a pistol holstered under your jacket, but you're unsure if drawing it will escalate things further. Traffic is blocked and no police are in sight. You need to act quickly to protect your daughter and escape the situation. So here is the question, and I'd like to see your answers in the live chat. You can put them on our Substack. You can put it on Patreon. You can put it in the Signal chat, whatever works best for you. In a scenario where you face an assault during civil unrest, how can a Christian reconcile the biblical command to do no harm, Romans 13:10, and seek peace with the duty to defend an innocent child from immediate danger, especially when non-lethal options may not be viable? What practical preparations, example, situational awareness, de-escalation training, or emergency supplies, and spiritual disciplines, prayer, studying scripture, can you undertake now to ensure your actions reflect Christ's love and justice in such a high stakes moment? This question challenges you to weigh Christian principles of peace and love against the protective role of a parent while encouraging proactive prepper strategies and spiritual grounding to navigate the moral tension. Okay, so number one, you always should have backups of your backups. So there's an old adage that says 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. And that applies to all sorts of things, especially guns. So you should not have one gun in your vehicle. What happens if that gun jams? You know, what happens if for whatever reason it's not usable? I can tell you, my wife, she has a special holster for one of her EDC guns. And the gun was taken out of the holster, was in her pocketbook, and the slide jammed on that thing. It was almost impossible to get that gun working again. Something happened to it. It was a SIG P365, in case you're wondering. And it was a challenge to get it back together. So how good is it if she had reached in her pocketbook to grab this pistol and it was jammed up and it doesn't work for whatever reason? Here's the next thing. Another instance with her, one of her guns, and not her fault at all. She had a magazine. I want to say it was a 12-round magazine. And out of the 12 rounds, 4 of the bullets that were hollow points, something had crushed the tip of the hollow points ever so slightly. When I measured it with a micrometer, we're talking thousands of inches difference, but you could see it by looking at it. And so I've got the magazine inserted and I'm cycling the pistol and it jams. And I look in it and here's a round where the bottom of the hollow point is caught on the front of the magazine, so it won't go into battery. So I drop the mag, I get rid of the bullet, I stick it back in again, I continue shucking the gun, and it happened 5 times. So I took those 5 rounds, had a look at them, put a micrometer on them. Sure enough, they had some deformation on the hollow points. Put the 5 back in a magazine, tried a different magazine just for shits and grins, stuck it in, charged it, jam. Dropped the mag, dropped the bullet, put the magazine back in, charged it, and it jammed. Did it repeatedly on that. So that's the next thing. What happens if you have a failure to load, a failure to cycle? You should never have one gun at your disposal. So you should always have at least 2. 3 is even better. 3, realistically, in a vehicle, you could have 2 sidearms and an AR pistol, a PCC, pistol caliber carbine, whatever the case may be. So number one, in this situation here, I don't have one gun in my truck. You know, I have multiple guns at my disposal. Number one. Number two, both of our vehicles' windows are really dark, tinted very dark. So the people banging on the windows are not going to be able to clearly see what I'm doing versus I can see what they're doing. So in this particular instance, I am not going to allow them to escalate this further. Maybe they take my 12-year-old daughter and do heinous things to her. Maybe we say, just take the car and we get out, and they kill us anyway. You cannot trust your life to somebody else in that type of situation. So I'm going to say to my daughter, put your fingers in your ears. It's fixing to get really loud, and I'm going to shoot my way out of that situation. Always aware of what's behind my target, depending on the ammo. If I'm shooting Pilgrim ammo, I don't have to worry about over penetration. That's another story. But I'm not giving them the car. I'm not giving them the groceries. I'm not giving them the ability to abduct my daughter and do heinous things to her. End of story. 3 is 2, 2 is 1, 1 is none. You should have multiple firearms at your disposal. So with that being said, we got a brand new video to close out with tonight called The Great Mega Divide. John will be back tomorrow night at the usual time, 7 p.m. Eastern. I will be back Monday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. Can't tell you what the topic's going to be tomorrow night or Monday because we haven't decided yet. We'll see what shakes out over the next 48 hours. We're definitely concerned over the prospect of attacks on Easter Sunday, Good Monday. Let's knock on wood and hope that that's not the case, but it wouldn't surprise me if we were very unfortunate and saw some sort of attack over the next couple of days. If that happens, by the way, we will go live with information that we have immediately, and we will be posting what we know on our Substack, our Patreon, our X. And again, we'll be going live just like tonight. We're broadcasting 8 different platforms. We'll be going live to blast information out regardless of any type of SHTF situation, whether it's this weekend or some point in the future. As long as you have internet access, you have internet access to Survival Dispatch and Survival Dispatch News. And we'll do our best to get that information out to you. All right. Hope you all enjoy this video between now and tomorrow night when John Wheaton comes back. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. God bless America.
Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries, we uncover a perplexing division, a movement torn between vision and noise, loyalty and doubt. It's a mystery we call the Great MAGA Divide. Donald J. Trump, a man who's planned America's comeback for decades, risks all for a safe future. Through manufactured witch hunts, weaponized lawfare, attempted assassinations, he has stayed the course to make America great again. His champions rise. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Dan Bongino are rooting out rot that plagues the FBI. They battle cartels, secure borders, and violent activists. Forging justice from chaos isn't an easy task. Yet within the ranks, a schism emerges. Some grow restless, ensnared by impatience. They demand instant retribution. Epstein's secrets exposed, traitors in chains, oblivious to the steady gains unfolding. Are they really as MAGA as they claim to be, or master doom posters ensnaring simple retards with the latest clickbait of the day? Their discord sows doubt, threatening the very cause they claim to champion. Who fuels this unrest? That question lingers unsolved. Still, the dedicated press on. Bondi's reforms dismantle divisive policies, Patel uncovers hidden truths within the FBI, and Bongino enacts resolute measures to restore integrity. When the dust settles, the resolute will endure and the whiners will fade. But will these wavering voices grasp the greater purpose? That, too, remains a mystery. Join us next time on Unsolved Mysteries, when perhaps you will uncover the truth behind the Great MAGA Divide.